Chapter 1621. Daddy, you really can't blame me for this. Yu explained innocently. Who asked Daddy to suddenly appear behind him when he was concentrating on making the cake, giving him a big fright. He was so frightened that he inadvertently drew his mouth crooked. Yun Shusher laughed until tears rolled down her cheeks. Mu Yaja's sugar figurine's expression was so creepy that she couldn't stop laughing. Idiot, stop laughing. Mu Yaja felt a little embarrassed. The other three sugar figurines were so cute, but his sugar figurine had a fierce and dry expression. Most importantly, its mouth was crooked to one side. It was unbelievably ugly. He felt a little wronged. When he saw Yun Shusher laughing again, he had the urge to hide the sugar figurine. However, he couldn't. Yu had painstakingly made this cake for her. Otherwise, he would have destroyed it long ago. Seeing that his mother was amused, Yu was also infected by her happy and joyful mood. His lips could not help but curl into a smile, and he actually laughed along with her. Xiao Yichen had secretly taken a look at the cake and Mu Yaja's ugly but cute sugar figurine. He had already laughed along the way. However, now that Yun Shusher and Yu were laughing, he couldn't help but laugh too. The three of them laughed together. Mu Yaja's expression darkened. He glared at Yu warningly. Yu understood. He cleared his throat and coughed. He immediately stopped laughing and said to Yun Shusher, "Mommy, don't laugh anymore. Let's blow out the candles, okay?" "Okay." Yu immediately took out the digital candles and stuck them on the cake. Then, he lit the candles with a match. The flames flickered, illuminating the faces of the four people. "Xiao Yichen, let's sing a happy birthday song to Mommy together." Xiao Yichen immediately reacted and clapped his hands. "Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to my dear Mommy, happy birthday to you." Yu said excitedly, "Mommy, hurry up and make a wish." Yun Shusher immediately clasped her hands together and closed her eyes sincerely. She smiled and silently made a wish. Then, she blew out the candles. Phew, wow. That's awesome. Little Yichen jumped up and down in excitement, his saliva almost flowing out of his mouth uncontrollably. Suddenly, he curiously tugged at his mother's sleeve and probed, "Mommy, what birthday wish did you make?" Yu gave him a hard knock on the head. "You big idiot. Wishes won't come true if you say them out loud." "Oh, I see." Xiao Yichen couldn't hide his disappointment. However, when he thought about how he was going to eat the cake, he immediately became happy again. "I can finally eat the cake." As he spoke, he greedily reached out his little hand to grab the little sugar figurine on the cake. Yu hit his head again. "Idiot. Mommy hasn't cut the cake yet. You're not allowed to eat it." Xiao Yichen groaned and held his forehead in pain. He blinked his big, watery eyes sadly and looked at Yu as if he was silently complaining. Yu also stared at him. Yun Shusher didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why was it that Xiao Yichen, the younger one, didn't act like an older brother like Yu? Xiao Yichen was more timid. Chapter 1622. Mommy, hurry up and cut the cake. That way, the birthday ceremony will be complete. Okay. This little bun really knew more than she did. Mu Yaja walked forward and held her hand. Yun Shusher turned around and smiled at him. Then, they cut the cake together. The two little guys clapped and cheered. Yu, can we eat now? Little Yichen stared at him greedily, his saliva almost dripping from his mouth as he stared at the cake. Yu glanced at him in disdain and said expressionlessly, "Please wipe your saliva first." Xiao Yichen was confused. Yu sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Stupid brother, why are you so greedy?" "Because Yu's cake looks so tempting. It must be delicious." Xiao Yichen said honestly. Yu was speechless for a moment. Then, he sighed and took the initiative to cut a piece of cake and passed it to him. "You little greedy cat, eat it. I don't want this. I want the sugar figurine on the cake. Yu Yu pondered for a moment and asked curiously, which one do you want? Xiao Yichen was drooling. I want yours. Yu Yu immediately said, no. Why not? Can't you eat yours? Xiao Yichen felt wronged and said, mine doesn't look as good as yours. Stingy Yu Yu, let me eat your sugar figurine. As he spoke, he started to act coquettishly. Yu Yu, on the other hand, stood firm and shook his head vigorously. No. No. I won't let you eat mine. Humph. Yu Yu, stingy. Then I'll eat mommy's sugar figurine. As he spoke, he reached out his hand and grabbed the cutest sugar figurine that Yu Yu had spent the most effort on. Smack. Yu Yu slapped his outstretched hand away with a look of disdain. No. Xiao Yichen said dejectedly, what's wrong now? You can't eat mommy's either. Why don't you eat daddy's food? Yu Yu said. When Xiao Yichen heard this, he felt wronged and mumbled unwillingly, I don't want to eat daddy's little candy figurine. She's so ugly, I can't bear to eat her. Yun Shishir and Yu Yu burst out laughing at the same time. At the side, Mu Yaja's face was extremely gloomy. There seemed to be cold air around him. Xiao Yichen shuddered violently. When he turned around, he saw Mu Yaja's incomparably frightening expression. He immediately explained earnestly, Daddy, I'm sorry. I'm not saying that you're ugly. I'm saying that the little sugar figurine on the cake is ugly. Don't be angry. Yu Yu, Yun Shishir, Mu Yaja's face darkened even more. Why did this little guy have to explain to him so seriously? Was he born to be a comedian? Yu Yu said, Xiao Yichen, be good and let mommy choose a candy figurine first. It'll be your turn after that. As he said this, he turned around and said seriously, Mommy, pick a candy figurine and try it. Yun Shishir said in surprise, Eh? Are you talking about the candy figurine standing on the cake? Yes. Can it really be eaten? She was still a little surprised. This was the first time she had seen a candy cake. The 4 little candy figurines that Yu Yu had molded were lifelike, lively, and adorable. She did not expect that these candy figurines could be eaten. Lifelike. Except for Mu Yaja's candy figurine. Chapter 1623. Anyway, she didn't want to eat his little sugar figurines. Yu Yu looked at her with disdain. Stupid mommy, of course you can eat them. These figurines are made with sugar. The insides are filled with sugar and the outside is coated with icing. They're very sweet. However, this is my first time trying to make a sugar cake and I haven't tried it yet. I don't know how it tastes. Mommy, try it first. Yun Shishir nodded. Then, she reached out her hand and picked between the 4 figurines with her fingertips. At that moment, she couldn't decide which one to eat. Although these figurines were made with sugar, they could still break their necks in one bite. Just thinking about it was a little creepy. Yu Yu suddenly asked, Mommy, what flavor do you like? Flavor? Yu Yu blinked and said proudly, yes. I made these 4 figurines with different flavors. There were different flavors of sugar, so there were many flavors to choose from. He purposely chose 4 flavors and made 4 little sugar figurines. Therefore, each of the 4 little sugar figurines had a different flavor and were unique. When Mu Yaja heard this, he looked at him in surprise. This kid was full of tricks. There were actually 4 different flavors of sugar figurines. Oh. Yun Shishir was interested. She pointed at Xiao Yichen and asked, what flavor does Xiao Yichen have? Strawberry. Then, what about yours? My little sugar figurines are made with milk flavor. Yu Yu smirked. Mu Yaja asked curiously, then, what about mine? Daddy's is made with chocolate. Xiao Yichen was also very interested. He asked greedily, then, what about mommy's? Yu Yu smiled mysteriously. That's a secret. Humph. Wow, with Yu Yu's tantalizing words, Xiao Yichen's desire grew. The unknown and the most mysterious were always the most desirable. Xiao Yichen wanted to try the flavor of his mommy's little sugar figurines even more. Yun Shishir glanced at Xiao Yichen. She saw that he was staring at her little sugar figurines greedily. Therefore, she picked one of Xiao Yichen's little sugar figurines and left hers for the two little guys to try. She raised Xiao Yichen's little sugar figurines and waved it in front of him. She pretended to be fierce and said, Xiao Yichen, mommy is going to start eating you. As she spoke, she deliberately and viciously bit the sugar doll's little hand forcefully. Little Yichen playfully held his arm and said pitifully, Oh. Oh. Mommies. Don't. His exaggerated and amusing reaction made it seem as if she had bitten him alive. Mu Yaja's lips curled into a smile as he was amused by his son's clown side. Yu Yu said cheekily from the side, Mommy. Bite his head. Yun Shishir raised her eyebrows and bit Xiao Yichen's head. Xiao Yichen immediately pretended to be in pain and held his head. My head seems to have been bitten by something. It hurts. It hurts, ha ha ha, Yun Shishir couldn't help but laugh. Alright, Xiao Yichen, mommy won't tease you anymore. Then, she took her little sugar figurine from the cake and squatted in front of Xiao Yichen. She handed it to him. Xiao Yichen, mommy's little sugar figurine is for you, okay? Chapter 1624. Thank you, mommy. I love mommy so much. Yu Yu immediately said indignantly, Idiot, why aren't you thanking me? I made the cake. Xiao Yichen smiled. Thank you, Yu Yu. Yu Yu was finally satisfied. Yun Shishir looked at him lovingly. Xiao Yichen, try Yu Yu's cooking. Okay. Xiao Yichen couldn't wait to take a bite. The poor little sugar figurine was bitten off by him, revealing a cross-section of its head. It was actually rainbow candy paste. Wow! Xiao Yichen's mouth was full as the sweet candy paste filled his mouth. The delicious sweetness filled his mouth, and he was so happy that he wanted to cry. It's so delicious. This is the most delicious cake I've ever eaten. Xiao Yichen was pleasantly surprised. He danced with joy and excitement. Yun Shishir glanced at it and was also surprised. She didn't expect her little sugar figurine to be made with rainbow candy paste. It had to be mentioned that the candy paste only had one flavor. However, Yu Yu had spent a lot of effort on her sugar figurine. He purposely mixed different flavors together. The purple one was grape, the red one was strawberry, the green one was apple, the orange one was orange, the yellow one was lemon, the red one was coffee, and the blue one was blueberry. The 7 flavors implied that in his heart, his mommy was the most perfect woman in the world. There were a total of 7 flavors. In order to prevent the candy paste from melting and mixing the flavors, he specially used a sugar coating to separate the flavors. He spent about an hour just to make this sugar figurine. From kneading it into shape, to coloring it, and finally to the finished product, he was especially serious. Yun Shishir was so touched. She knew very well how much time and energy it took to bake. In the past, when she had a personal activity in school, she had also tried to bake. However, she was clumsy and the biscuits she made were all burnt. Just by looking at this beautiful cake, Yun Shishir could imagine Yu Yu standing on a stool in the kitchen with his head lowered, carefully kneading the cream in his hands, imagining her appearance as he carefully made the cake. A warm current seemed to flow into his heart. Today was really, what a pleasant surprise. This was probably the happiest birthday she had ever had in her life. Yun Shishir was satisfied. Xiao Yichen raised the candy figurine to Yun Shishir's lips and said considerately, Mommy, this candy figurine made by Yu Yu is so delicious. You should try it too. Yu Yu was also looking forward to it. Mommy, try it and see how it tastes. Yes. Yun Shishir nodded and took a bite under the serious gazes of the 2 little munchkins. When the 7-colored candy paste entered her mouth, it instantly overflowed with sweetness, filling her mouth and teeth. The candy paste made by Yu was sweet but not greasy, soft but not sticky. It was just the right amount of sweetness, but it made one want to taste it again. Yun Shushu had never eaten such a delicious cake and was pleasantly surprised. "It's so delicious," she said honestly. "Yu, how did you come up with it?" "I bought a baking book and learned a little from it." After pausing for a moment, Yu said proudly, "However, Mommy's candy figurine wasn't learned from the book. I created the rainbow candy paste myself. It's really great." Chapter 1625. When Yu saw this, he was naturally happy. He could tell that his mommy was enjoying the birthday present that he had specially prepared for her. "Mommy, is it delicious?" "It's delicious." Xiao Chen was the first to reply. Yu glanced at him. "Humph. Greedy little kitten, I didn't ask you." Yun Shushu was delighted. She bent down and hugged him. Yu, the cake you made is delicious. Can you make it for Mommy next time?" "Mommy, you're a greedy little kitten too." Although Yu sounded arrogant, he couldn't hide the joy on his face. He licked his pink lips and asked bashfully, then, "Mommy, do you like the birthday present that Yu specially prepared for you?" "I like it." Yun Shushu answered without hesitation. When Xiao Chen heard this, he leaned over and said, "Mommy. Mommy. Then, do you like the birthday present that I made?" "I like it very much too." Yu and Xiao Chen looked at each other. The two little guys seemed to be fighting over this. Sparks flew in the air. The two squishy little balls looked at her and asked in unison, "Then whose present does Mommy like the most?" Yun Shushu was stunned. She looked at the two children blinking their big, watery eyes at her. For a moment, she couldn't make a choice. She liked the presents that the two children had given her a lot. She couldn't tell which one she liked the most. She was very touched. However, the two little lads seemed to be fighting for her attention. They insisted that she pick one. She really couldn't pick one. Suddenly, Yun Shushu had an idea. She raised her hand and flashed it in front of their eyes. "Mommy still likes Daddy's present the most." Yu and Xiao Chen looked at her hand at the same time. They saw a dazzling diamond on her ring finger. It was Dairy Ring's rare pink diamond. It was extremely eye-catching. Yu had seen this custom-made diamond ring in a magazine. It was worth 8 figures. Pink diamonds were very rare. A 1-carat pink diamond was even more precious. When Xiao Chen heard this, he immediately looked at Mu Yaja indignantly. He pouted and said unhappily, "So this is what Daddy prepared." "How cunning." Yu asked, "Did Daddy propose to Mommy?" Yun Shushu smiled and nodded. "Yes." Yu felt an inexplicable bitterness in his heart. He nervously grabbed Yun Shushu's wrist and asked anxiously, "Then, what about Mommy?" "Mommy, did you agree to Daddy's proposal?" He had originally thought that his daddy had prepared a huge sum of money for his mommy to book the entire fairy tale valley and prepare a grand and romantic birthday party for his mommy, just like in fairy tales. Who would have thought, the real gift that Daddy had carefully prepared was actually a proposal. For a moment, his feelings were complicated and he didn't know how to describe them. He was happy for his mommy, but he also felt an inexplicable bitterness and melancholy. He had clearly been looking forward to his daddy's proposal for a long time. He had also sincerely hoped that his mommy and daddy would be together forever and happily ever after. Why was it that after his wish came true, he felt a little worried and bitter? Yun Shushu glanced at Yu. His pink lips were gently curved. He was clearly smiling, but it was not sincere. It was as if he was forcing himself to smile. Yun Shushu was stunned for a long time. Then, she slowly nodded and said gently, "Mommy agreed." Yu's mind went blank. His eyes flickered slightly. Mommy was getting married. Chapter 1626. He didn't know if he should be happy or worried. There was a sense of disappointment in his eyes that shouldn't be there at his age. Yun Shushu's smile froze when she saw his complicated expression. She looked at him and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This little guy, why did he look so disappointed and melancholy that only a father would look when his daughter was getting married? She didn't know why, but when she saw Yu Yu's expression, she felt an inexplicable heartache. This child probably couldn't bear to part with her. At the same time, he was worried that her marriage wouldn't be perfect and blissful enough. Or perhaps, he was worried that that man wouldn't be able to give her the greatest love. Yu Yu, are you unhappy? Yun Shushu probed carefully and lowered her voice. Yu Yu immediately shook his head. No. Mommy, don't think too much. In fact, Yu Yu's disappointment wasn't because he couldn't bear to part with her. It was because he was afraid that his daddy wouldn't be like him, who would accept his mommy unconditionally and treat her like the apple of his eye. He was selfish. He hoped that his mommy would receive the greatest love in the world. He was also conceited. He thought that the only person who could give his mommy the greatest love in the world would be him. As a father, he approved of Muyaja. But as her husband, he still held a skeptical attitude. However, he was conflicted and a little happy. Mommy was going to get married. In the future, they would no longer be lonely as a family of 4. At this thought, Yu Yu's lips curved into a smile. He looked up and his twinkling eyes were bright and beautiful, as if there were countless twinkling stars hidden in them. Mommy, Yu Yu. I'm very happy. Mommy is going to get married. Yu Yu will definitely make Mommy the most beautiful bride in the world. When Yun Shushu heard this, she couldn't help but tear up. Yu Yu's intentions were incomparably precious. More precious than any treasure in the world. She hugged Yu Yu emotionally and kissed his pink cheeks. Thank you, Yu Yu. Mommy, don't say thank you. Yu Yu's tone was a little reproachful. She looked at her and laughed. Mommy's happiness is Yu Yu's happiness. Mommy, I wish you the best. With that, his lips curled into a smile as he suddenly grabbed her hand and led her to the front of the man. He then raised his head to look at him. Daddy, hand. Yu Yu ordered like an old man. Muyaja couldn't help but laugh a little. Looking at this overly precocious child in front of him, he secretly laughed in his heart, but his face was very serious. He obediently stretched out his palm. Yu Yu held Muyaja's palm with one hand and grabbed Yun Shushu's hand with the other. With a solemn expression, he carefully placed Yun Shushu's hand in Muyaja's palm. Daddy, in the future, you must protect Mommy well. This is what you promised me. You must cherish her for the rest of your life. Muyaja smiled and looked at Yu Yu's face. He said very seriously, okay, I'll definitely do what I promised you. Yu Yu then revealed a bright and beautiful smile. In the sky, the fireworks were dazzling. On the tree-lined path, the festooned cars were cruising. The crystal carriage stopped beside Yun Shushu. Muyaja held her hand and got into the carriage. In the dreamy parade, they gradually left. Yu Yu silently watched the carriage leave, still in a daze for a long time. Chapter 1627. He poked his head out and saw that Yu Yu's eyes were slightly wet. Xiao Yichen smiled helplessly and his gaze softened. Yu Yu, don't worry. If Daddy dares to bully Mommy, I won't let him off. I'll let him have a taste of my demonic skills from the special forces in a minute. As he spoke, Xiao Yichen waved his fist. Yu Yu was amused by his words. He couldn't help but tease him, do you think Daddy is a pushover? Xiao Yichen, forget it. You're still lacking in both intelligence and skills if you want to fight with Daddy. Hey! You! Xiao Yichen wanted to comfort him, but he ended up being snubbed instead. His mood instantly soured. Yu Yu rubbed his eyes and said, Idiot, you're overthinking. I'm not worried that Mommy will be bullied. I'm just a little touched. Xiao Yichen was even more surprised. You're touched. In his heart, Yu Yu had always been an extremely noble and cold existence. He was cunning and sharp-tongued, and he was extremely mature. However, today, he saw the softest side of Yu Yu's heart. All right. Let's go see the float parade. Xiao Yichen held his hand without any explanation. Yu Yu nodded and the two little lads walked in the direction of the float parade. On the float parade. Yun Shishir looked at the float parade that kept passing by. On the float parade, there were two actors dressed as the king and queen from the fairy tale. They were waving at the tourists by the roadside. Mu Yaja had spent millions to book the entire fairy tale valley and silently prepared a romantic proposal for her. Although he had booked the entire valley, it was still open to tourists. He wanted the whole world to be a witness to this proposal. Just like in the fairy tale, however, the reality was, Mu Yaja sat in the carriage and held his forehead in frustration. As the carriage passed by, the tourists excitedly followed it and took pictures with their cameras in their hands. Luckily, he and Yun Shishir were wearing masks. Mu Yaja, who was usually swift and decisive, suddenly felt a little embarrassed. How childish. In fact, he felt that such a proposal was a little childish for him. Since he was young, he didn't believe in fairy tales. How could there be such a dreamy love in this world? Therefore, he never dared to watch fairy tale movies and even scoffed at them. To him, love was realistic. In the past, he would have thought that it was childish to ask him to wear a prince's attire and create such a dreamy and beautiful atmosphere to propose to her. In the past, he would never have spent so much effort on a marriage proposal. Marriage was to propose to zzzzzz. However, when he accidentally flipped through her diary, he discovered that there was a little princess living in this woman's heart. Moreover, she had a beautiful fantasy about the fantasy of fairy tales. It was just that she never mentioned it. The diary was written in elementary school. She probably felt that people would laugh at her if she told them about her dream. However, every girl wished to be a princess. At least a princess in the eyes of the man she loved. She wanted to be protected and doted on for the rest of her life. Therefore, he wanted to fulfill her dream of being a princess and give her a memorable and romantic proposal. Chapter 1628. But, sigh, Mu Yaja sat in the carriage, his body tense. Yun Shishir tilted her head to the side, not knowing whether to laugh or cry at this moment. She did not know whether to laugh or cry at the man's tense expression. Mu Yaja, do you feel embarrassed? She laughed and asked. It was indeed a little childish for such a noble and cold man to wear a prince's suit and sit in such a childish crystal carriage. Mu Yaja did not want to talk. Yun Shishir held his hand. Did you prepare so much in secret to give me a surprise? Mu Yaja patted her head. Are you happy tonight? Yes. Of course I am happy. Yun Shishir looked down at the gown on her body and asked in confusion, where did you get this gown? It was custom-made a long time ago. Mu Yaja said again, it was the main attraction of Chanel's spring fairy tale at the Milan fashion show. He liked it at first glance and had it custom-made according to her size. Yun Shishir was so touched that she could not speak. Sometimes, Yu Yu and Mu Yaja, this father and son pair, really had a strong similarity. On the surface, the two of them looked very noble and elegant, with cold expressions and cold gazes. However, sometimes, when they were with their loved ones, they were so warm. Mu Yaja really warmed her heart this time. Mu Yaja, Yun Shishir held his arm and blushed shyly. I love you. Mu Yaja lowered his head and looked at her. His eyes were full of love. The night scene was charming and the stars were bright. Yun Shishir looked out of the window and felt very satisfied. At the side, Mu Yaja saw that the night had turned cold. He took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Hugging her shoulders, he asked, have you finished filming for today? At the mention of this, Yun Shishir's expression darkened. She sighed and replied dejectedly, no. I didn't perform well today, so I was scolded badly by director Gu. You didn't perform well? Mu Yaja asked suspiciously, not in good condition. Yes. Yun Shishir had just nodded when she suddenly remembered the reason why she didn't do a good job today. She was stunned. Facing him, she suddenly felt very guilty. If Muyaja found out about what happened on set today and found out about Hua Jin, what would they think of her? Would he misunderstand that she was having an affair with another man? When she thought about how Muyaja had parachuted onto the set and coincidentally met Gu Xingzi to revise with her, Yun Shishir still felt an inexplicable lingering fear. She didn't want him to know about this. She was afraid that he would misunderstand. She didn't want him to misunderstand. But if she didn't say it, she would feel inexplicably guilty. Muyaja saw that she kept her head down and didn't know what she was thinking. Suddenly, he said in a deep voice, "Shishir, don't act anymore. Marry me and be my wife. I will take care of you." Yun Shishir's expression suddenly froze. She lifted her head and looked at him in disbelief. I'm serious." Muyaja gazed into her eyes. Her bewilderment was reflected in his deep gaze. Let me finish. Chapter 1629. He hugged her. His gaze was filled with longing, and his eyes were filled with longing. "You don't know how much I missed you in the 2 weeks that you were not around." That one sentence made her heart race. His seductive voice whispered into her ear, and his warm breath blew on her cheek, causing her heart to feel a little itchy. It was just a simple sentence, but it was full of deep meaning. Yun Shishir clenched her fists nervously. She was so embarrassed that her face and ears were red. She missed him too. However, other than filming, she spent most of her time memorizing the script. After filming started, there were some changes that needed to be made. Her character's lines had to be changed a lot. Hence, she spent a considerable amount of time memorizing the script. But she didn't want to. She had tried to ask Gu Xiaoyang for leave so that she could go home and spend time with her child and him. But her request was heartlessly rejected. Qin Zhou had also advised her not to ask for leave so often when filming had just started. Otherwise, the rest of the crew would misunderstand that she was enjoying special privileges. There were many people in the crew. Anything she said would be especially sensitive. If she wasn't careful, she would attract a lot of criticism. Seeing that she didn't respond, Muyaja grabbed her chin unhappily and narrowed his eyes. "Don't tell me that you're just going to let me stay in an empty room all by myself?" Stay in an empty room all by himself? Pfft! Yun Shishir was almost amused by his words, which were full of bitterness. "Hey! What do you mean by staying in an empty room all by myself?" Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry at his resentful tone. "Hey, Muyaja, stop fooling around." "I'm not fooling around." Muyaja frowned. He really didn't want her to continue working in the entertainment industry. That kind of place was too messy. It was a place where people indulged in luxury and materialistic desires. Regardless of whether they were men or women, it was a place where people abandoned all restraint. Although the entertainment industry was called the entertainment industry, what was it actually? It was just a backyard for the capitalists, a place for the rich and powerful to enjoy and play as much as they wanted. It was no longer that pure. In this day and age, those who could make a name for themselves in the entertainment industry were all backed by rich people. On the surface, it looked like a game between celebrities. In fact, the ones who were really playing the game were the capitalists behind them. She liked acting, that was fine, but he didn't want her to treat it as a career. Previously, he had thought that since she liked to perform, even though he didn't like her entering the entertainment industry and pursuing such a career, as her man, he shouldn't interfere with her. He should give her the greatest freedom to a certain extent. But now, he felt that he couldn't do that. If she treated acting as her career, then the time left for him would be greatly reduced. He had been without her for half a month. Without him, he felt that his days were dull and boring. He missed her. No matter if it was his body or mind, he missed her crazily. He was beyond redemption. He missed the days when he hugged her to sleep. Now, whether he closed his eyes or opened them, the side of the bed was empty. The huge room gave people a feeling of desolation. In the past, when she was at home, he would always feel warm whenever he came home. But now, when he opened the door, he felt that the house was a little less lively. It was too cold. Chapter 1630. Yun Shusher's heart skipped a beat. She actually saw an unconcealable loneliness on his face. It was only then that she suddenly realized, so, because of work, because of her neglect, he actually felt lonely. In her heart, a sense of guilt arose spontaneously. However, Yun Shusher was extremely conflicted. On one hand, she loved acting, but she also hated dealing with those foul and unspoken rules in the entertainment industry. On the other hand, she wanted to leave the entertainment industry to accompany him, but she felt that if a woman left her career and only stayed by a man's side, she would be like a beautiful vase and would always feel insecure. From what she knew, a woman also needed a career and needed to be self-reliant. She shouldn't rely on a man to live. Be my wife and I'll take care of you. Probably, in this world, no one would have the infinite confidence to say such a thing like him. She knew that her career might not even be worth a mention in his eyes. To her, she had worked hard to act, stayed up late to memorize the script, and dealt in that extravagant circle. In his eyes, the remuneration she received might not even be worth a minute of his benefits. To put it in a funny and ironic way, all the remuneration she received from acting in Lethal Beauty might not even be worth what he earned in a minute. However, although the remuneration was low, it was in exchange for her hard work. Being able to get the director's approval and be liked by the audience was her greatest satisfaction. Her career made her life more fulfilling. However, if she really left her career, returned to her family, and became a caged canary, she only needed to dress up beautifully and charmingly every day, like those upper-class ladies or socialites. She only needed to take care of her husband and children and surround her husband and children, but she didn't have her own career. Could it be that she would really be happy like that? Wouldn't such a life be too empty? It wasn't that she hadn't considered such a problem. However, she really lacked a sense of security. She didn't dare to use her own life as a stake to gamble her entire life. What if one day, he got tired of her? What if her marriage failed? Then she wouldn't have a career or a marriage. Wouldn't such a life be too miserable? Yun Shusher didn't dare to imagine. Perhaps he had too little confidence in himself. Mu Yaja looked at her. He didn't know what she was thinking. However, looking at her expression, it was complicated and unpredictable. It seemed that this woman was thinking about something again. He gently placed his palm on the back of her hand. Just as he was about to speak, Yun Shusher suddenly grabbed his hand and looked up with a serious expression. Can you give me some time? What time? Yun Shusher said seriously, I still don't want to give up my career. Why? Mu Yaja was deeply puzzled. Shusher, your salary is nothing in my eyes, but I earned it on my own. Yun Shusher emphasized again. It's not about the amount, it's about my pride. Mu Yaja could not understand such pride. Chapter 1631. Mu Yaja's expression changed slightly when he heard this. What kind of logic does this woman have? He said, this is different. How is it different? Yun Shusher stared at him intently and said, how is it different? Is it because you're a man and I'm a woman? You're the strong one and I'm the weak one. So, as the weak one, I can only give up my right to have my own career and stay at home like those rich ladies, waiting for you to come back. Day after day, boring through each and every day. Is that so? Mu Yaja was suddenly speechless. Or is it because I'm a woman, so you're certain that I don't have your ability and that the money I earn won't be enough to support you? Yun Shusher asked again. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes. It's not what you think. Yun Shusher was silent for a moment and stared at him. She took a deep breath and asked, then what is it? Mu Yaja pondered for a long time and suddenly said, I just want you to spend more time with me. Yun Shusher laughed and said in a low voice, but I've never been anyone's personal subordinate since I was born, right? I shouldn't exist just to accompany you, right? Yun Shishir continued. Mu Yaja couldn't argue with her. Yun Shishir sighed and said plainly, actually, I know that you don't like my career. Although you won't interfere with me, I know that you don't like my job. Every look in your eyes, every expression, every detail is silently telling me that you hate my acting. You hate that I neglect you because of my acting. She paused for a moment and nodded with a guilty look. Yes, I know that there are many times when I neglect you, you and Xiao Chen. Especially in the last half a month, I really didn't have time to care about you. It's my fault. I admit that I also feel very guilty. I'm very sorry. Especially when I saw the birthday party you guys prepared for me, I felt especially guilty. I'm sorry. Mu Yaja's gaze softened. You don't have to apologize. It's not your fault. But I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to be like those rich ladies and become a caged canary. Yun Shishir covered his hand and pleaded, so, please give me a little more time, okay? I have my own plans, and I have my own plans for the future. Please don't interfere with me, just like how I will never interfere with your career, okay? What's your plan? Yun Shishir smiled and said, I want to be a director in the future. Also, I hope to set up my own film and television company. I want to invest in my own scripts, shoot movies, and produce films. For now, I'll be an actor for the time being. Once I've accumulated enough capital, I'll work hard to transform into a behind-the-scenes role. If you want, I can fulfill your wish right now. Mu Yaja held her hand. Yun Shishir's expression froze and her smile turned cold. But right now, I don't have the confidence to run such a big company. At least give me some time to train myself. Mu Yaja remained silent. Chapter 1632. Yun Shishir pleaded, I promise you that I will make adjustments in the future. I will choose between work and family and try my best to take care of all of you. I'm really sorry that I didn't consider your feelings during this period of time. But I promise that I will try my best to avoid such things from happening again. When Mu Yaja heard this, even though he was conflicted, he still decided not to interfere with any of her decisions. He knew her well. This stupid woman lacked a sense of security too much. She could be a rice worm for the rest of her life, but she was stubborn in her bones and was unwilling to depend on anyone to live. Just like Yu. He already had a lot of wealth, but he still hid it from Yun Shishir. Firstly, he did not want her to worry too much about him. Secondly, even if Yu was worth billions, Yun Shishir would not depend on him to live. This was also why she was cute and charming. She was different from those materialistic women in the industry who were greedy for power. He probably hoped to earn money with his own ability and spend his own money in a dignified manner. In fact, she was indeed very talented in acting. It was indeed a good choice to work behind the scenes in the future. How much time do you need? He raised his eyebrows and asked. His attitude showed that he had already compromised. Yun Shishir thought for a moment and then smiled. Give me 5 years. 5 years was enough for him to accumulate experience. In these 5 years, she would work hard to learn and accumulate more surprises to be fully prepared for her transition behind the scenes in the future. Actually, it's not that I didn't think of retiring. But I'm the one who decided to act. Since I made this decision, I should be responsible for my own decision. If I quit now, not to mention the sky-high liquidated damages, I will definitely implicate Qin Zhou. If I suddenly announce that I'm quitting the entertainment industry in the middle of filming, this would be a little too irresponsible. I know that I didn't have the chance to take care of my family for the past 2 weeks, and I feel very guilty. I thought about it and decided to ask Qin Zhou to help me and the crew to try to take 2 days off every week to go home. After this film, I will only accept works that I like. I won't let my schedule be so full anymore. If he took a step back, she would also take a step back. Moreover, she was very sincere. She had always placed her family first. Before this, she never expected that after entering the entertainment industry, she would be so busy that she didn't even have time to take care of her family. She had originally planned to focus on her family after filming The Green Apple and occasionally take on a few projects that she was interested in. During this process, she would work hard to study screenwriting and directing. Between acting and directing, she was more interested in directing. When her abilities matured, perhaps she could also help him manage Huanyu. She knew that it would be very tiring, but she was happy to be able to work hard with her own ability. However, she really couldn't do it if she had to rely on anyone to survive. After she finished speaking, she looked at him with some apprehension. She was afraid that he would object and that he would not understand. Mu Yaja frowned but did not object in the end. He curled his thin lips and looked at her gently. He raised his hand and gently stroked her head with a doting smile. Good. I will wait for you. He gave her 5 years. These words gave Yun Shishir great relief. Chapter 1633. Leaning on his shoulder, she said softly, Mu Yaja, thank you. Thank you for understanding my stubbornness, thank you for understanding my decision. She leaned over, her soft and exquisite body pressing against his. Mu Yaja hugged her tightly, but purposely teased her. He lowered his head and kissed her red lips, asking back, You. How do you plan to thank me? Yun Shishir looked up, only to see him looking at her with a bit of passion and anticipation. Yun Shishir suddenly smiled, her bright eyes reflecting the gorgeous fireworks in the sky. Her smile was like a flower. Amidst the fireworks in the sky, she took the initiative to hook her arms around his neck. Her beautiful face leaned closer to him, and then, her sweet red lips gently pressed against his thin lips that were cold from the cold wind. The kiss deepened, gentle and charming. The crystal horse carriage drove through the romantic cherry blossom avenue. The passers-by looked up and saw an indescribably beautiful woman kissing a handsome man in the carriage. They all exclaimed in amazement, Oh my God! Quick, look! Quick, look at the horse carriage. It's so romantic. I heard that Fairy Tale Valley has been booked by someone today, decorating it dreamily for the proposal ceremony, and it's open to tourists for free. Let the tourists witness it. Don't tell me it's the 2 people in the horse carriage. The woman is so beautiful, and the man is so handsome. Oh my God! They're so compatible. Under the witness of the crowd, under the beautiful and gorgeous fireworks, Yun Shishir hugged him, kissed him, and used the most intimate way to respond to him. Mu Yaja could not help but wrap his arms around her slim waist. His sexy lips curled into a slight smile. He was obviously very satisfied with her initiative. This kiss continued all the way to the main gate, and he was still reluctant to part. From the beginning, she took the initiative, until later, when she fell into his control, he kept attacking with impatient passion, attacking the city, unwilling to be separated from her. Yun Shishir was almost suffocated by his kiss. In a daze, she tried to force herself to sober up, but from the corner of her eyes, she saw that the horse carriage had already driven to the main gate, and the extended Bentley was waiting quietly at the gate. However, the driver standing in front of the car door did not dare to look directly at it, his head lowered, eyes and nose looking down, not daring to disturb them. She was even more embarrassed. Clenching her fist, she lightly punched his shoulder. But he was unmoved, not allowing her to escape. He held her neck tightly, forcing her lips to be closer to his, the tip of his tongue between her lips, constantly stealing her sweet breath. How long has it been since he tasted such deliciousness? He already could not remember. Kissing her, he could not stop. No. Yun Shishir was angry and embarrassed. This man, how could he not bear to stop once he started kissing her? There were so many people at the gate. Didn't he know he? From the corner of her eyes, Yun Shishir saw that many tourists were either stunned or heckling around the horse carriage, constantly raising the cameras in their hands, trying to capture such a romantic and beautiful scene. Wasn't this a little too high profile? Yun Shishir punched his shoulder, but before she could say anything to stop him, she felt the world spinning in front of her eyes. This man actually carried her in his arms and stepped out of the horse carriage. Chapter 1634. Yun Shishir saw the heat in his eyes. You, Shu, Muyaja's voice was hoarse and dark, as if he was trying hard to suppress something. Be good, don't talk. Her soft and bone-chilling voice was undoubtedly the most powerful aphrodisiac at this moment. If he wasn't careful, he would be completely ignited. He could still barely hold it in. Muyaja carried her and walked to the front of the car. The concierge opened the car door, and he hugged her and stepped into the car. Just as the car door closed, he pressed a button to raise the partition between the driver's seat and the back seat. The covetous look in his eyes made her feel an inexplicable fear. Muyaja, you, before she could finish her sentence, he pushed her down onto the seat. Immediately after, his tall body pressed down on her. Don't. She widened her eyes in panic and instinctively reached out to push him away. However, she was resisting, which aroused his desire to conquer her even more. When it came to matters of love, a man's desire to conquer would arise spontaneously from his bones. Moreover, he had to be in control of all the initiative. Even if she resisted, with her small strength, there was no way she could go against him. Moreover, she was going against the current Muyaja. As if he had gone mad, he covered her with his body and fiercely kissed her lips. Like a young man who had tasted the forbidden fruit for the first time, his kiss was impatient and predatory as he constantly sought her sweetness. Yun Shishir was almost unable to breathe from his kiss. She pushed his chest, but the man's heavy body was like Mount Tai, attacking her like a mountain toppling over. No matter how hard she tried, she still couldn't move an inch. Hey, Yun Shishir struggled uneasily, pushing him away and avoiding him. Muyaja suddenly pressed on her shoulders and opened his handsome eyes. She suddenly looked up and met his deep and endless eyes. The heat in his eyes fell on her face, as if it would burn her. He looked back at her. She stared at him, her eyes as helpless as a fawn's. Her charming eyes were like silk, and her beautiful peach blossom eyes were overflowing with light, rippling with gentle and beautiful emotions. Especially at this moment, it was as if her face was smeared with a layer of rouge. It was so damn charming. The sight of her caused him to feel as if a wave of terrifying numbness was spreading along a certain part of his body, causing his tendons and bones to soften and spread throughout his entire body. He wished for nothing more than to ruthlessly eat her up at this very moment. Looking into his dark eyes, it was as if there were two flames burning fiercely, as if they were going to devour her soul. However, in the end, he managed to maintain his last bit of rationality. Muyaja tried his best to control himself, suppressing the impulses in his body that were ready to explode. He hugged her, but he did not dare to move anymore. Hugging her tightly, his heavy breaths echoed in her ears, one after another, like a ferocious beast eyeing its prey, constantly letting out heavy breaths. She was shy and helpless as he pinned her under his body. Similarly, she did not dare to make any rash movements. She was afraid that if she wasn't careful, she would agitate him instead. Separated by a thin layer of clothing, she could easily feel the change in a certain part of his body. At this moment, it was already as hot as iron. She didn't dare to move even more. Her face was flushed red, and she was so shy that her face and ears were red. What was this? She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This man was actually so. Chapter 1635. Muyaja hugged her even tighter. Every minute and second felt like an eternity of torture. His tense body was screaming, and the fire in his body was raging. Every second he endured, his breathing became heavier. Who knew what he was enduring? Enduring wasn't his style. If it were in the past, he would have wanted to skin her alive and integrate her into his bones and blood. However, he was afraid of scaring her. He knew very well that this woman did not like to do it in the car. So, to take care of her feelings, he had to endure until they reached the hotel. However, enduring like this was really torturous and painful. The thin layer of sweat on his forehead was seeping from his skin, silently telling her how much pain he was in. Yun Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry, and her heart ached. After not seeing her for half a month, he really missed her. Whether it was his body or his heart. Damn it, he missed her. From his tense body and the fiery temperature, she could feel how hard this man was enduring at this moment. She hugged him tightly, and her heart could not bear to see him like this. Therefore, she held his handsome face lovingly and kissed him encouragingly between his eyebrows. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "Thank you for doing so much for her. Thank you for giving in and changing for her." He used to be such a proud man, but for her, he kept changing and giving in. "Kiss me." His dark eyes were burning brightly as he stared at her face and said to her. Yun Shishir smiled and kissed his thin lips. However, he was not satisfied. He kissed her lips deeply, as if he could use this to cool down his burning body and mind. Unexpectedly, this kiss was so inseparable that they kissed all the way. When the car stopped at the entrance of the hotel, he hugged her. The person in his arms was already in a daze from his kiss, and she did not know where she was from. When they were outside the car, the chauffeur gently knocked on the car window and said carefully, "CEO Mu, we've arrived." Only then did the two people in the car wake up. He left her lips, only to see her face in a daze. Her face was tender and naive, but it made her even more charming. She, on the other hand, felt a little dizzy from his kiss. When she left his lips, her eyes were slightly narrowed and the world was spinning in front of her eyes. His kissing skills were improving day by day, and in front of him, she was like a pitiful newbie. She was still a little inexperienced and was controlled by him, allowing him to dominate her. He couldn't help but smile as he lightly patted her face. "We're here, little fool." Yun Shishir was still in a daze. She opened her eyes and looked around. When she pulled open the curtains, she realized that the car had stopped. She asked dizzily, "Where is this hotel?" Just as he finished speaking, before she could regain her senses, he pulled her into his arms and got out of the car. She let out a soft, "Ah." At the entrance of the hotel, rows of waiters stood respectfully. Under everyone's gaze, he carried her in his arms and walked through the door grandly. Once again, Yun Shishir was so embarrassed that her face was burning red. Why was this man so high profile? Couldn't he keep a lower profile? If other people saw him carrying her like this, what would they think? She gently hit his shoulders and said softly, "Hey, can you put me down? I can walk on my own." Chapter 1636. He loved her dearly. Seeing her in a daze, her body limp and weak without any energy, how could she walk? But if Yun Shishir knew what the man was thinking at that moment, she would roll her eyes again. Heavens, just how precious was she in his heart. He couldn't even bear to walk a few steps. Sometimes, it really wasn't an exaggeration. In front of this man, her pair of legs were just like decorations. They were purely for looks and had no practical use at all. But if he could do that, Mu Yaja was willing to carry her like this all the time. He couldn't wait for her to grow on his body. Ha! If Yun Shishir knew what he was thinking, she would probably not know whether to laugh or cry. He carried her and got out of the car. As if he didn't see the embarrassment on her face, he hugged her and strode towards the hotel with big steps. When the 2 rows of concierges saw him, they all lowered their heads and bowed in unison. All of them kept their heads down and didn't dare to look up. With the concierge leading the way, he carried her into the elevator. Under her many requests, he finally put her down. However, she didn't know if it was because she had been pressed down by him for a long time, but the moment her feet touched the ground, she went limp and almost fell to the ground. She managed to support him and barely managed to stand firm. The man looked at her, but there was a hint of playfulness in his eyes. He stretched out his long arm and wrapped it around her slender waist. His strong arm firmly supported her and lifted her body up a little. The elevator doors slowly closed. At that moment, only the two of them were left in the narrow space. The quieter the space, the clearer the sound of the man's covetous breathing could be heard. It was heavy and deep, rising and falling one after another. It was obvious that he had endured to the point where he was on the verge of exploding. Yun Shusher held onto his arm and could clearly feel his tense muscles. She didn't know why, but she inexplicably felt her legs go limp. Her face and ears were red as she thought about how this man had suppressed himself for so long. She didn't know what kind of storm she would have to face next. Because of that, she felt a little uneasy and didn't know what to do. The hotel building was 30 stories high. The suite he booked was on the 28th floor. The floor numbers jumped and the elevator continued to climb. At the same time, the temperature in the elevator also rose. Yun Shusher sensed that his body was getting hotter and hotter, and she silently wanted to hide to the side. However, he immediately noticed her subtle movement and abruptly grabbed her waist. He snorted, "What are you hiding for? I won't eat you." Would it eat her up? She couldn't help but question his words. This man was truly a monster. It was as if he had an inexhaustible amount of energy, and he never felt tired at all. How could he be so powerful? She had heard that most men would only be able to last one night in bed before they would be exhausted. However, this man only needed to recharge his energy for a short period of time, take a shower, and change into a suit. Then, he would return to his work in high spirits with the demeanor of an elite of the empire. Wasn't he tired? Or was he born with great physical strength? According to her observation, this was under the condition that he was conservative. Every time he still had some reservations in bed, she was already being tormented to the point where she was about to fall apart. If he didn't hold back, what would happen? Ah! Chapter 1637. Yun Shusher couldn't control herself from letting her imagination run wild. When she came back to her senses, she clenched her fists tightly. She was secretly annoyed at herself for thinking of such a dirty question. On one hand, she forced herself to stop thinking about it. On the other hand, she was extremely curious about this man's physical potential. Was he too strong, or was she too weak? This was a problem. As Yun Shusher thought about it, she blushed and pursed her lips. She felt that her moral integrity was almost eaten up. She could even seriously probe into such a question. She really didn't know shame. Mu Yaja glanced at her from the corner of his eyes and saw that her cheeks were flushed red. She was secretly sizing him up while holding her burning hot face. She looked like she didn't know what to do. He didn't know what kind of nonsense was going on in this little head of hers. There was obviously something wrong with her expression. Hence, he asked, "What are you thinking about?" His sudden voice had startled her. She suddenly raised her head and shook her head guiltily. She hurriedly said, "I'm not thinking about any messy questions." Mu Yaja squinted his eyes suspiciously. She was giving herself away. This stupid woman. He didn't say anything, but she was so nervous. Her words were obviously trying to cover it up. Yun Shusher had just finished her words when she suddenly realized what she meant by, not thinking about any messy questions. She had said such strange words and it would only make him more suspicious. She was so embarrassed that she was about to die. She was as childish and ridiculous as a child. Perhaps it was because she wasn't a match for this man. She had never been good at hiding her thoughts. If there was anything, she didn't know how to hide it properly. Hence, she had become a joke to him. He suddenly closed in on her and wrapped his arms tightly around her waist. Step by step, he pressed on. "Tell me honestly. What kind of nonsense are you thinking about?" I'm really not thinking about any nonsense," the more Yun Shusher said, the less confident she was. Even she wouldn't believe what she said. As for this man, his skills were so much higher than hers. Obviously, he wouldn't believe what she said. Hence, he leaned over slightly and got closer to her face. Sticking close to her ear, he said seductively, "Say it. Otherwise, I'll do you right now." His words were obviously laced with danger. Yun Shishir suddenly looked up and met his threatening eyes. She flew into a rage out of humiliation. You! I didn't just say that. Mu Yaja smiled like an experienced hunter. His elegance and calmness were akin to that of a prey trapped in the palm of his hand. Moreover, he was full of interest. Yun Shishir got even angrier. However, under his threat, she lowered her head and said unwillingly, "Nothing much. I'm just curious about one thing, that's all." "What?" She took a deep breath. "You never seem to get tired." Mu Yaja was stunned. Suddenly, he was amused by her serious look. He immediately guessed what she was secretly probing. "What are you laughing at? You little fool. You're too weak." The elevator door opened. He took her hand and strode into the room. He walked so fast that she stumbled behind him, unable to keep up. Mu Yaja. Chapter 1638. Don't, the door wasn't closed yet. However, what she got in return was the man's kiss. It was as if at this moment, the emotions that had been suppressed for a long time had finally been released. For the past half a month, including the journey from Fairy Tale Valley to the hotel, he had been trying his best to restrain himself so that at this moment, he would not hold back at all. He lowered his head, pressed down on her shoulders, and kissed her deeply. The ferocious and predatory energy was comparable to when they were in the car just now. In fact, it was even more ferocious. Even though she repeatedly cried out in surprise, she could not resist him. He pressed his lips against hers and swallowed all of her resistance and rejection into his stomach. Previously, to take care of her, he had tolerated himself. However, now that they were here, it was the world where he could do whatever he wanted. He did not need to care about those trivial matters, and he did not need to suffer any more. Now, he only needed to think about how to properly taste her goodness. In an instant, he had filtered out more than 10 positions in his mind. Just as his fingertips touched her skin, he felt a burning sensation and kissed her fiercely. In the past half a month, he had missed her so much that he had missed her so much. He was also surprised that he could actually control himself and not fly to the set to look for her. This woman had a unique charm. Once he had tasted her, he would never forget her. No matter what, he would always be able to recall her sweetness. In this world, other than her, there was probably no other woman who could be so compatible with him. As he kissed her, it was as if he was reminded of the time when he had her. That carefree and unrestrained feeling was still vivid in his mind. When he touched her, it was as if he was bewitched and could not get rid of it. Door. As Yun Shishir struggled, she tried her best to remind him that he seemed to have something that he had not done. However, Mu Yaja was a little impatient. His long arm stretched out and with a click, the door was successfully closed as she wished. When she saw this, she heaved a sigh of relief. In the next second, she was lifted into the air. He actually reached out and his strong arm held her up steadily. At this moment, she was facing him with her back against the entryway, but her whole body was lifted into the air by him. "Look at me." Mu Yaja reached out a hand and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Look at me." Yun Shishir looked at him and her gaze froze. "Stupid woman, you should concentrate now." He was a little dissatisfied that she was distracted by unimportant things, so there was some displeasure in his eyes. "All of your time tonight belongs to me." After saying that, he steadied her and withdrew from her. The emotions that he had been suppressing for a long time were already clamoring to the extreme. With a ferocious ferocity, he practically charged straight into her. He didn't give her any room to breathe. He pressed her down and took her for himself. Ferocious, he was as ferocious as a wild beast. He wanted her, 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 he wanted her. Even though she was prepared for it, she was still frightened by such a shocking impact. After he was done, he panted heavily and hugged her, not willing to let go. Holding her in his arms, he walked to the living room, sat on the sofa, and continued what he had yet to enjoy. Chapter 1639. The battle lasted until midnight, but the man was still not satisfied. He fully displayed his seemingly inexhaustible stamina, and it was as if he wanted to use this night to vent all his longing for her for the past half a month. When he was aroused, he kept calling her name, and she kept responding to him. At first, she tried her best to cooperate with him, but later on, she was so tired that she gradually lost her stamina. The battle was close to madness, and the smoke of gunpowder filled every corner of the bedroom. She only felt that the world had gone crazy. The sky was spinning, and the earth was moving. The whole world seemed to be collapsing, and the earth was shaking. All her rationality was ethereal, and it was difficult for her to return to her shell. Her mind was filled with the thought that he had gone crazy. And she, too, had gone crazy. They had both gone crazy. It was as if their bodies no longer belonged to them. Their bodies were dripping with sweat, and it was sticky. It felt as if the two of them had been fished out of a pool. Outside the door, the two little lads were curiously leaning against the door. They originally wanted to sneak around and find out what was going on. However, they were helpless as the soundproofing of the hotel was really amazing. The two of them wanted to stick their ears to the door, but they still couldn't hear anything. Sigh, forget it. Yu suddenly snorted and said, I listened to your nonsense, and that's why I came to do such a thing with you. Eavesdropping on Daddy and Mommy is too despicable. If Daddy finds out, he'll be angry again. Xiao Yichen felt wronged and said, Boo-hoo. You were the one who wanted to steal, shut up. Yu blushed and covered his mouth. He said anxiously, if you continue to talk nonsense, I'll ignore you. Okay. I won't talk nonsense anymore. I wanted to eavesdrop, so I pulled you along. As an older brother, Xiao Yichen naturally gave in to him, so he couldn't be bothered to argue with him. Yu was satisfied. He pursed his lips and looked at Xiao Yichen with a smile. He opened his palm and said, okay. Let's go back to the room to rest. Okay. Xiao Yichen held his hand, and the two little rascals held hands as they returned to their room to rest. It was late at night outside the window. With a deep groan from the man, the two of them climbed up the gorgeous clouds. At this time, the two bodies lying on the bed were already soaked in hot sweat. Towards the end, he suddenly grabbed her cheeks and kissed her seductive little mouth. Ugh, Yun Shishir's cries were all overbearingly swallowed by him. With the last bit of strength, he completely relaxed his tense body and laid on top of her, panting heavily and rapidly. The man's sexy and deep breathing kept echoing in her ears. His warm breath brushed against her ear, making her feel itchy, but she was powerless to resist. After that, she was completely paralyzed in his arms, unable to move at all. And the important responsibility of dealing with the aftermath naturally fell on him. After Mu Yaja calmed down, he couldn't help but scratch the bridge of her nose. Little rascal. This stupid woman. Throughout the whole process, he was the one who put in the effort. What about her? After everything was over, she was like a little rascal who only knew how to act shamelessly. She was paralyzed in his arms and didn't want to move at all. But it wasn't her fault. Chapter 1640. When he calmed his breathing, she was still panting heavily. One after another, it was as if the surrounding air was extremely thin and she was almost unable to breathe. It was as if he was trying his best to fill it up, but no matter what, he felt that it was not enough. Under his enlightenment, her body seemed to have turned into a puddle of spring water. Mu Yaja hugged her and walked into the bathroom. He filled the bathtub with warm water and sank her into the water, letting the two of their bodies submerge in it. When he calmed down, he liked to hold her like this. Then, he would quietly admire her beauty. Yun Shishir nestled in his arms, her left face quietly pressed against his chest. The hair on her face was soaked with sweat and messily stuck to her face. However, after hundreds of years, it did not affect her pure beauty in the slightest. Her beauty was a kind of otherworldly beauty that did not hide a trace of dirt. At this moment, her eyes were half closed and there was a trace of drifting in her eyes. Her long and thick eyelashes drooped down, covering her eyelids with a layer of shadow. Her eyelashes were moistened with sweat and there were a few droplets of mist standing on them, making this beauty even more ethereal. He secretly thought in his heart that if it was in the ancient times, she would definitely be an evil concubine that would bring disaster to the country. She would definitely be the kind of beauty that would cause chaos in the imperial court. So much so that for him who had always had a firm heart, in that moment, a cold thought suddenly floated in his mind: he might as well just die on top of her. Muyaja helped her clean up and at the same time, he still could not control himself from entangling with her lips. Yun Shishir, however, was enjoying his gentle intimacy. She hooked her arms around his shoulders and responded to his kiss. Occasionally, she would stick out the tip of her tongue and poke him. Muyaja originally wanted to teach her a lesson, but just as he carried her upright, this pitiful little woman was so wronged that she was begging for mercy. "I really can't do it today. I will be killed by you here. Let me go, please. I don't want it. I really can't want it anymore." Seeing her so pitiful, Muyaja showed mercy and dispelled the thought. After the two of them had taken a shower, he wiped her clean and carried her back to the bedroom. After getting on the bed, Yun Shishir comfortably rested her head on his arm and fell asleep soundly. This sleep was peaceful and steady, and it was actually a dreamless sleep. Early in the morning, he was woken up by the urgent ringing of the phone in the living room. Yun Shishir was still sleepy, but Muyaja was suddenly woken up. He put on a bathrobe and walked to the living room. He saw that it was Yun Shishir's phone ringing in her handbag. He picked up the phone and heard Qin Zhou's voice on the other end. "Shishir. Where are you? Yesterday, the crew found out that it was your birthday and wanted to celebrate with you, but you disappeared without a trace." Muyaja's brows sank slightly when he heard the manager's voice. "She's with me." These 5 words were a high-profile declaration of sovereignty. In his eyes, Qin Zhou was undoubtedly a big, love rival. It was a heinous crime to divide up the time that they spent together. Before Yun Shishir could respond, Qin Zhou heard Muyaja's deep voice and was so shocked that he almost threw his phone away. After a short moment of shock, Qin Zhou laughed. "Chairman Mu. Ha! So Shishir is with you. I'm relieved. Shishir is now. She's still sleeping." Chapter 1641. The words "too tired" left enough room for one's imagination to run wild. The corners of his lips twitched. He could almost guess the reason behind her "too tired." They hadn't seen each other for more than half a month. They must have been busy until late last night. Qin Zhou looked down and cleared his throat. Then, he said awkwardly, "Okay. Then. I won't disturb Chairman Mu's rest. By the way, please send my regards to Yun Shishir on my behalf. Happy birthday." Muyaja, however, replied, "You can say that to her face. I'm never in charge of passing on messages." Qin Zhou, his tone was so harsh early in the morning. Just a few words and it was full of tension. It seemed like he was implying that he was blaming him for making her schedule too full. There was clearly a hidden meaning in his words. Qin Zhou awkwardly exchanged a few more words before hanging up the phone. After giving it some thought, he realized that he had indeed made her schedule too full recently. After reflecting on it, he made another call to rearrange her schedule. Muyaja hung up the phone and returned to his room. In the afternoon, Yun Shishir was jolted awake by the noisy ringtone of her phone. She abruptly woke up from the ringing of the bell. She opened her eyes and heard the ringing of the bell. She turned her head and realized that the phone in her handbag had unknowingly been placed next to her pillow. She calmed her disturbed state of mind. Just as she raised her hand and was about to grab her phone, she was suddenly shocked by the feeling of accounting coming from the joints of her arm. "Tsk. It's so sore." Yun Shishir frowned and mumbled. She endured the pain and picked up the phone. Yun Yecheng's apologetic voice came from the other end. "Shishir, are you free this afternoon? This afternoon, this afternoon. Yun Shishir looked around the room. Only then did she recall the madness last night and where she was at the same time. The curtains in the room were closed, so she could not see the weather outside the window, nor could she tell what time it was. However, based on her sense of time, she knew that it was very late. When she turned around, the side of the bed was already empty. She didn't know when the man had left. From this, she could deduce that it was already late. Yun Shishir held her phone and her face suddenly turned pale. Ah, she remembered that she had a scene this afternoon. Only then did Yun Shishir remember that she still had to film a scene today. Yesterday, her scene with Hua Jin had not been completed. Logically speaking, she still had to shoot another scene today. And now, it must be almost noon, right? Oh my God. She had slept so deeply that she had wasted so much time. Why didn't that man remember to wake her up? She had a lot of work to do in the afternoon. She didn't know if she could make it in time. Sure. On the other end, Yun Yecheng's voice snapped her out of her daze. Yun Shishir suddenly came back to her senses and smiled. Daddy, I'm listening. I should be able to get to the train station this afternoon. However, I have a lot of luggage, so it's not very convenient. So, I wanted to ask if you have time to come over and help your uncle. After saying this, he paused for a moment before quickly adding, it's okay if you're really busy. If you really can't make it, you can take a taxi back. Yun Shishir was a little conflicted. She had a scene in the afternoon. However, she really couldn't bear to see her father rushing, so she asked, what time will you reach the station in the afternoon? Chapter 1642. All right. Don't worry, give me a call when you arrive, and I'll come over to pick you up. Do you have anything on in the afternoon? If you have something to say, then just let it go. The man persisted, still thinking of her best interests. Yun Shishir laughed. What can I have on? Dad, don't worry. I'm free this afternoon. He smiled, feeling touched by her thoughtfulness. After giving her a few more words of advice, he hung up the phone. She looked at the time and saw that it was 11:30 p.m. Hence, she hurriedly dialed Director Gu's number. She wanted to ask when the afternoon shoot would end, but the man politely said, Sure, it was your birthday yesterday. I wanted to arrange for everyone in the production team to celebrate your birthday, but unfortunately, I don't know where you went afterward. Since it's your birthday, I'll give you 2 days off. Have a good rest today and tomorrow. Report to the production team the day after tomorrow. The man's kind words gave her a huge shock. To be honest, she was a little dumbfounded. In reality, she had called Gu Xiaoyang to ask for a day off, but when she thought about how she had left the set without permission yesterday, she braced herself for a harsh scolding. Trembling with fear, she waited for Gu Xiaoyang to give her a good scolding. After all, the production team clearly stated that no one was allowed to leave the set without permission. It was the same as clocking in at work, one was not allowed to leave without permission. Yesterday, she had left the set without saying a word. Logically speaking, Director Gu would definitely criticize her for speaking on her own. He would also give her an appropriate punishment. In the end, he would make an announcement to the entire set to punish her as an example to others. However, he didn't expect Gu Xiaoyang to be so reasonable after this phone call. He even approved 2 days of leave. 2 days of leave. Did the sun rise from the west? This was a rather luxurious treatment that only A-list stars or protagonists could enjoy. Yun Shishir was ecstatic. Although she had an unfinished scene and felt a little uncomfortable with the unfinished work hanging there, these few days were indeed too tiring for her. She needed time to rest properly. After half a month of continuous filming, she was already exhausted. She had applied for leave several times, but the director did not approve it. She did not expect to be granted leave today. Yun Shishir was so excited that she couldn't calm down. She put down her phone, sat up, and lifted the quilt to get out of bed. However, Just as she lifted the quilt, she suddenly saw the ambiguous marks on her body. Especially the base of her thighs, there were actually bruises. She was so embarrassed that she couldn't even show her face. Her skin was very white and tender. Even if she was casually pinched without using any strength, it would leave an eye-catching mark. Not to mention the unrestrained battle last night. When she thought of this, Yun Shishir felt extremely embarrassed. When she got off the bed, the moment her toes touched the ground, she almost fell down. Oh God, her thighs were sore and swollen, and her waist was so soft. She didn't know what had happened to her body after that night. When he got off the bed, his whole body was in a daze, and there was even a faint feeling of lack of oxygen. Rather than saying that he was crushed by the wheels, it would be more appropriate to say that his entire body felt like it was falling apart. At this moment, even moving his arms was strenuous. Yun Shishir calmed down, gently massaged her waist, took a deep breath, and got off the bed. Chapter 1643. Pushing open the door, she was greeted with a room filled with warm sunlight. The sun was shining brightly outside the window. This was a luxurious suite that included a small business conference room, a living room, a bedroom, a bathroom, and a study room. Yun Shishir put on a bathrobe and walked into the study room. She saw Mu Yaja sitting in front of the computer, staring intently at the screen. He was so focused that he didn't realize that Yun Shishir was standing behind him. It was only when she leaned against his back and wrapped her arms around his shoulders that he suddenly realized that she had entered the room without him knowing. Are you busy? Yun Shishir rested her chin on his shoulder and looked at the computer screen in front of him, only to realize, to her annoyance, that the files on the screen were actually a series of densely packed financial reports. Just looking at them gave her a headache. It turned out that he was dealing with the company's quarterly financial reports. She said guiltily, "Did I disturb you?" Mu Yaja smiled and patted the back of her hand gently. His voice was gentle as he asked, "Why don't you rest for a while? If you continue sleeping, it'll be night soon." Yun Shishir paused and laughed. "Why didn't you wake me up when you were awake?" Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and said innocently, "I saw that you were sleeping soundly and even snoring like a little pig. That's why I didn't wake you up." Snoring? Yun Shishir was shocked. She was shocked and retorted with a red face, "You're talking nonsense. I never snore when I sleep." "Why didn't you snore?" Mu Yaja wanted to tease her, though, so he said in all seriousness, "You're snoring really badly. Like a little pig. When I called you, you even smacked your lips. You don't look like a lady at all." She panicked. He was so serious that Yun Shishir believed his words without a doubt. She really thought that she really snored when she slept. Oh my God. She snored. It was so embarrassing to snore when sleeping. In her impression, snoring while sleeping was a coarse behavior that only middle-aged men would have. She had always valued her bearing. When she thought about how she had actually snored and let this man hear it, for a moment, she only felt her cheeks burning. It was incomparably embarrassing. Feeling conflicted, Yun Shishir bit her lower lip. She wanted to cry but had no tears. Pouting, she carefully defended herself. "Actually, it's normal for people to snore sometimes. Sometimes, when people are too tired, they will snore when they sleep, don't." Halfway through her words, she felt embarrassed. She wanted to say that he didn't mind her. Mu Yaja, on the other hand, was tickled by his earnest attempt to absolve himself. Thus, he raised his hand and couldn't help but pinch the tip of her nose as he teased, "You're not just snoring. I really want to take a picture of how ugly you look when you sleep." "Huh? What's wrong with me?" "What do you mean not only? What's wrong with me?" Mu Yaja nodded seriously. "Yes. Does drooling count with drooling? Boom, wait a minute." Yun Shishir's face flushed red. Why was she drooling? Yun Shishir was so shocked that she instinctively touched her mouth, but she didn't feel any saliva stains. Chapter 1644. Mu Yaja slapped her hand away. Stop touching. When I woke up in the morning, your saliva was all over my arm. I used a towel to wipe it clean for you. He said it so seriously that Yun Shishir believed him even more. With a dejected look, she said, Why was I salivating? I really don't know. As she said that, she bit her lips in annoyance and cried out in her heart. It's over, it's over. Her ugly sleeping state was actually seen by this man. Yun Shishir was very concerned about her image in his heart. Salivating and snoring. Why was she like those middle-aged men who picked their feet when she was asleep? Seeing her reaction, Muyaja found it cute and interesting. He couldn't help but curve his lips and snigger. Yun Shishir heard him snickering and looked at him suspiciously. Alas, he was quick to restrain himself. By the time he looked at her, his smile had already disappeared and he was looking at her with a straight face. He did not know how to laugh at all. I might really be too tired. I hope you don't mind. However, Muyaja harumphed coldly. Salivating and snoring. I can tolerate that. But do you know that talking in your sleep in the middle of the night, rolling up the blanket, and even kicking people? That's really too much. Yun Shishir widened her eyes in shock and looked at him in disbelief. That's impossible. When I'm sleeping, I'm quite well behaved. I've never kicked people or talked in my sleep. Her. Rolling up the blanket was especially too much. When I woke up in the middle of the night, the blanket on my body was gone. As he said that, Muyaja sighed helplessly. I really don't know how badly you tormented me last night. Yun Shishir bit her lips. She really wanted to cry but had no tears. She really didn't know that she had so many bad habits when she was asleep. Muyaja even sneezed according to the situation, scaring Yun Shishir so much that she didn't know what to do. Are you alright? It's fine. Muyaja frowned. She probably caught a cold. When Yun Shishir heard this, she felt even more regretful. She wrapped her arms around his and said, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I really didn't know my sleeping posture was so bad. That was because I had always slept alone. You had never said that when I slept with him in the past. That's why I didn't know I had a bad sleeping posture. When Muyaja heard this, he laughed in his heart, but on the surface, he pretended to be noble and cold, ignoring her. Yun Shishir was even more frightened, thinking that what he said was true. She said pitifully, Did you catch a cold? If I catch a cold, I'll feel guilty. Just as she was racking her brains to come up with a way to smooth things over, the man's lips curled into a smile as he suddenly wrapped his arms around her waist. In just a split second, he had her in his embrace. Lowering his head to look at her, he lovingly planted a kiss on her cheek. Her. Little idiot, no matter how bad your sleeping posture is, I like it. Yun Shishir was stunned. Looking at the playful look in his eyes, she suddenly reacted. Pointing at him, she complained, You weren't teasing me just now, were you? You just realized. Muyaja moved his face closer to hers. The playful smile in his eyes had a tinge of naughtiness as their noses touched. I like to tease you. He liked to see her flustered and helpless, like an anxious little bunny. Chapter 1645. This was probably one of the few disgusting interests that he could enjoy. Yun Shishir punched him hard, but even though she used a lot of strength, it did not hurt him at all. He could not help but laugh. To him, this little fellow's strength was not worth mentioning at all. Muyaja, why are you so bad? You actually lied to me and said that my sleeping posture was bad, hey? Do you know that I almost believed you? Yun Shishir felt extremely wronged. She had actually been so stupid to believe his words and even seriously consider how to explain herself. But she did not expect that he was just teasing her. She was extremely unhappy. Why did she feel so stupid and gullible? Was it fun to tease her? Muyaja rubbed the tip of her nose and asked gently, Why are you getting out of bed now? I saw that you were so tired yesterday. Why don't you rest for a while more? His words fell into her ears, but they were extremely ambiguous. Seeing that she was so tired, his words made her recall the crazy scene from last night and her face became even hotter. She pushed him away and stood up from his body. She was afraid that he would see her blushing face and tease her again. So she walked to the bedside and pushed the window open slightly to let the breeze in from outside to cool down her burning face a little. Mu Yaja sat on the chair and turned around. He found it funny and said, "What's the matter? Feeling shy?" "No way." Yun Shishir turned around and glared at him. "Stop teasing me, okay?" He smiled and nodded, restraining himself a little. He knew that this stupid woman was especially thin-skinned. Some jokes should be stopped when appropriate. If they went overboard, even a rabbit would bite when anxious. Yun Shishir suddenly asked, "Are you free this afternoon?" "Yes." Mu Yaja replied. Actually, he still had a few cases to deal with in the afternoon. However, one of the standards of being a wife's slave was that whenever she asked if he was free or if he had time, it meant that she had something to do. Therefore, even if he had something to do, he had to answer, yes. If he couldn't finish the case, he could leave it for tomorrow. He wasn't in a hurry anyway. She was number one. If Yun Shishir knew about this, she would definitely be touched to death. However, as a man, he would definitely want to save face. He couldn't let her know that he had rejected several cases for her. If she found out, she might secretly feel proud of herself. Seeing that he was free, Yun Shishir asked, "Can you come with me to pick someone up this afternoon?" "Who?" "My father." Yun Shishir smiled. "He's coming back to Beijing today. He'll arrive at the train station in the afternoon. It should be around 4 o'clock. If you're free, come with me to pick him up." Mu Yaja smiled. "Okay, I'll accompany you." When Yun Shishir heard this, she was in a good mood. However, she suddenly thought of something and asked again, "Are you really free this afternoon? I see that you are usually very busy." "I happen to be free this afternoon." "Okay. Love you." She hugged him by the shoulders and gave him a kiss before running to the bedroom to report to her father on the phone. "Shishir, can you prepare 2 cars this afternoon?" "No problem. Do you have a lot of luggage?" "It's like this." Chapter 1646. Yun Shishir was taken aback by his words. Yun Yecheng found a secluded place and explained his purpose for coming. It turned out that Yun Yeho had initially refused to go to the capital for no other reason than that he knew what his wife was up to. She wanted to make use of this opportunity to escape from this destitute place and, by basking in Yun Yecheng's limelight, secure a good job for her 2 daughters in the city. If she could find a decent job in the city, it would be a glorious thing. This job, however, was another matter altogether. She was mainly thinking that if she could find a wealthy husband for her 2 daughters in the city, then she wouldn't have to worry about the rest of her life. Furthermore, with Yun Yecheng in the city, she would not have to work so hard to serve him. She even planned to find a second love and marry another man in the city. After all, she was still young in her 40s. She could not let Yun Yeho drag her down for the rest of her life. If she could marry another man, she would decisively kick away the crippled Yun Yeho and live a happy life of her own. Women, after all. Husband and wife were birds in the same forest, but they would fly away in the face of disaster. Moreover, there was a saying that went, "A fine bird chooses a tree to nest in." Yun Yeho was crippled and had lost his ability to work. He would have to rely on others to take care of him for the rest of his life. She did not want to be a coolie, so she naturally had the idea of looking for a better job. How could he not see through her thoughts? After being married for so many years, he had long figured out what she was thinking. Moreover, he was now crippled, so his mind was very sensitive. When a person reached this stage, they would be able to see things and people clearly. It was especially so at this time that one could see through people's hearts. Therefore, he did not want to be a burden to Yun Yecheng, so he repeatedly emphasized that he would stay in his hometown and not go to the capital. Alas, no matter how his wife and daughters persuaded him, he would not waver. His wife was almost angered to death by him. In the end, it was Yun Yecheng who came to persuade him. He told him, "Brother, I'm bringing you to the capital so that I can take better care of you. It's been hard on you these past few decades, I'm the one who made you suffer. You don't have to worry about whether going to Shangjing will bring me any burden or trouble. This isn't something you should be worried about. Moreover, you're my younger brother. This is what I should do. Don't tell me you want me to leave you at home and watch you suffer. How can I, as your older brother, stand by and watch? I've seen everything you've done for the past few decades. When I was in my prime, you quietly took care of my old mother for me. When I was down and out, you secretly came to the capital and gave me your hard-earned money. And these past few decades, you've been fulfilling filial piety on my behalf. You've been responsible for so many years. You've been responsible for so many things that you shouldn't be responsible for. Now that you can't bear it anymore, it's time for me, your older brother, to take responsibility for you. Mother is no longer here, and you are one of the few things I care about in this world. Come with me to the capital and let me take good care of you. Now that life is better, and Shishir is also working hard, I have nothing to worry about other than you." Chapter 1647. Ah ho, don't say such things. In any case, I've already made up my mind to bring you back to the capital. You don't have to throw a tantrum, just listen to my arrangements. Yun Yeho was touched by this, but he could not say anything about it. Now that Yun Yecheng was bringing Yun Yeho to the capital, his troublesome wife and 2 daughters would, of course, follow suit. As a result, Xiang Yu and her 2 daughters had packed their bags and followed him excitedly to the capital to enjoy life. As mentioned earlier, when Yun Yeho was young, he worked at a construction site and earned enough money to build a new house in his hometown. After building the new house, he married his wife and gave birth to a pair of daughters. What happened in the end? Although they were not rich at first, they still led a stable life. Man proposes, God disposes. Yun Yeho got injured while working and became half-paralyzed. With his pillar of support collapsing, the burden of living naturally fell on his wife's shoulders. She had a seriously ill mother-in-law and a half-paralyzed husband at home. Logically speaking, if he got injured at the construction site, it would be considered a work injury and he should be compensated. Alas, the contractor ran away with the worker's hard-earned money and could not be found. Not to mention compensation, he did not even get a single cent of his salary. As a result, he could only enjoy some subsidies from the village and rely on the few acres of farmland at home for his income. His wife was willing to work hard without complaint at first, but as time passed, she began to complain. Others were gradually leading better lives, but what about her? It was bad enough that her husband was useless, but he even became half-paralyzed while working at the construction site. Was this not equivalent to living as a widow? Not to mention earning money, she could not even live a normal life as a married couple. Although she had 2 daughters, she was not even 40 years old. She was at the age when she needed to live a life as a married couple. Now that she was half-paralyzed, she was practically a widow. This was even better. During the day, she had to farm outside, and when she returned, she had to take care of a seriously ill mother-in-law. Yun Yeho, who was bedridden, also needed to be taken care of. Gradually, her complaints increased. As a woman, she was also bullied outside. After all, the only man in the family had collapsed, so the villagers looked down on her and often made things difficult for her. At this time, one of her daughters failed to enter a university, so she sent her to work at the factory. As for the other, she was more promising and managed to enter a university. In the end, when she found the passbook at home, she found that the money in it had disappeared without a trace. With the passbook in hand, Xiang Yu went to Yun Yeho's sickbed and questioned him about the whereabouts of his money. Yun Yeho's mind at first. Later on, Xiang Yu threw a tantrum at home, smashing pots and bowls, which alarmed her 2 daughters. It was only then that Yun Yeho stuttered and explained that when Yun Yecheng's family was in dire straits a year or two ago, he had secretly given him a sum of money to tide him over when he went to the capital to visit his relatives. How could his wife let it go when she heard that? She began to pester him to ask Yun Yecheng for the money back. Yun Yeho refused. First, it was because he would lose face. The money had already been given out, so how could he ask for it back? Chapter 1648. She stomped her feet in anger. She cried, threw a tantrum, and threatened to hang herself, but her husband was adamant and did not care. In the end, her heart turned cold toward him. Honestly speaking, Yun Yeho's handling of this matter was indeed not perfect, so much so that Xiang Yu began to wonder if her husband was being too biased toward her brother's family, even though there was no fairness in this matter. Her husband was having a hard time, but did her family have it easy? At most, they would go bankrupt, but not only did she lose her source of income, but she also had to take care of a sick and disabled person. Now that their daughter was going to university, they had lost all their money. What was the meaning of this? Because of this, their younger daughter could not complete her university studies and had no choice but to work in a factory with their elder daughter. Because of this, she bore a grudge against them and even became sloppy when it came to taking care of her mother-in-law and husband. When Yun Yecheng found out about this when he went back to attend the funeral, he felt very apologetic and said that he wanted to compensate her with the money. Although the money was paid, the woman could not get rid of the hatred in her heart. Although she appeared polite on the surface, she did not buy it in her heart. What was the point of returning the money? Because of this, her daughter could not complete her university studies. This became her lifelong regret. One must know that having a university student in the family was a respectable thing. It was all ruined because of her husband's family. There was one more thing that he did not know. Sometimes, when she returned home late, it was not because she had just returned from the fields. Instead, it was because she had an affair with a bachelor next door behind his back, and the other party gave her a few hundred yuan for it. Everyone in the village knew that she was having an affair behind Yun Yeho's back, but he was kept in the dark. Hence, many people in the village secretly laughed at him. Everyone in the village laughed at Xiang Yu for being a loose woman. Anyway, her reputation had been spread out. They all said that she was a woman who did not abide by the virtues of a wife. When Yun Yecheng returned to his hometown this time, he also heard some gossip. He was furious and had many opinions about this woman. However, in order to avoid agitating him, he suppressed the urge to bring it up. Still, he did not have a good impression of this woman. His wife was the one who had shamelessly suggested this trip to the capital. Hence, he decided to find her a place to rent out once they reached the capital. He couldn't let Xiang Yu become Shishir's burden. At 4 in the afternoon, Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja arrived at the station early in the morning. Each of them drove a Mercedes-Benz SUV. Mu Yaja specially called for bodyguards to clear the road to prevent paparazzi from taking photos. They were all public figures. Naturally, they had to be on guard when they appeared in public. When the car arrived at the station, Yun Yecheng gave her a call. Yun Yecheng was stunned to see Mu Yaja, who was dressed in casual wear, standing in front of him, looking tall and slender. He then looked at Yun Shishir with suspicion in his eyes. "Shishir, isn't this your university professor?" Yun Shishir coughed and said, "Dad, let's go home first. There are too many people here, so it's not convenient to talk." All right. Yun Yecheng nodded and then turned to the wheelchair-bound Yun Yeho. "Ah ho, this is Shishir. Can you still recognize her when she grows up?" Chapter 1649. Yun Yeho stared at her for a long time before realization dawned on him. "Oh, my. Shishir. It's really you. I recognize you. He. He grabbed her hand and patted it as he lamented, "Shishir has grown up and is even prettier than when she was young. A girl changes 18 times between childhood and womanhood." Tears welled up in his eyes as he lamented. Xiang Yu and Yun Yeho's daughters, who were standing behind them, had ugly looks on their faces. However, they quickly suppressed their feelings of discomfort. Inwardly, Xiang Yu thought, we're not his daughters, so why is he being so affectionate? Yun Shishir glanced at her mother and her two daughters behind her before walking up to them with a smile. This must be Auntie, right? Nice to meet you, Auntie. Xiang Yu smiled. Of course, she had to do it well. She said enthusiastically, oh, sure. It's you. Look, you've changed so much since you've grown up that Auntie couldn't recognize you. At the side, her eldest daughter, Yun Qingmiao, suddenly asked, Sister Shishir looks different from when she was young. I can't tell. Yun Qingmiao was 3 years older than Yun Shishir and had met her once when she was young. Her other daughter, Yun Qinli, said disapprovingly, Sis, how many years has it been since you last saw Shishir? You must have forgotten how she looks like. Yun Shishir smiled and sweetly greeted, Sister Qingmiao, Sister Qinli. The two sisters went forward and shook hands with her, but for some reason, Yun Qinli looked at her strangely. Yun Qinli didn't really like her. After all, if not for Yun Yecheng's matter, she would not have failed to attend university and become a laughingstock. Mu Yaja walked forward, but when he appeared in front of the sisters, he instantly attracted the attention of the mother-daughter trio. He was too dazzling. Even though he was wearing sunglasses and a low-key casual outfit, standing silently beside Yun Shishir, it was hard to ignore his powerful aura. His presence was too strong. Yun Qinli had only noticed Yun Shishir at first, but Yun Qingmiao, on the other hand, had been sneaking glances at him from the start. Oh God, this man is so handsome. He was dressed so fashionably. Looking at the leather jacket he was wearing, it was obvious that it was expensive. Everything he was wearing was branded, right? This man must be very rich or has a good family background, right? Could it be Yun Shishir's boyfriend? Xiang Yu also noticed him. She tugged on Yun Shishir's sleeve and secretly asked, this. Yun Shishir was once again put in a difficult position. At the side, Mu Yaja said expressionlessly, hello Auntie, I am Shishir's husband. The sudden sound made Yun Shishir choke on her saliva. Cough. She snapped back to reality and glared at him unhappily. This man, how could he talk to himself? He had just proposed and had yet to register his marriage. How could he be considered her husband? Mu Yaja received her angry glare and smiled. What's wrong? Why are you so shy? Husband? Everyone exclaimed in unison in shock, but they all cast their gazes on them in disbelief. No one was more surprised than Yun Yecheng. This man, wasn't he her university professor? Why did he return to his hometown to visit his family for only a few months and become her future son-in-law? Yun Yeho's eyes widened as well. Chapter 1650. Yun Qingmiao pressed on. That's right. I haven't heard that you're married in our hometown, and there's no wedding banquet either. Have you guys registered your marriage? Yun Shishir was a little embarrassed as she answered, We haven't registered our marriage yet. Everyone's expression became even weirder when they heard that. Yun Yecheng, in particular, furrowed his brows and glared at his future son-in-law as if he were looking at a love rival. He was somewhat suspicious, afraid that the latter was a bad guy who had appeared out of nowhere to kidnap his daughter. His eyes were full of wariness as he sized him up. Mu Yaja also sensed the unfriendliness in his father's gaze. He turned to look at him and gave him a deep smile. On the other side, when Xiang Yu heard Yun Shishir's words, she was a little picky. How can you be considered my husband when you haven't registered your marriage? Yun Shishir was about to reply when Mu Yaja spoke first. Shishir is my wife. Whether we register our marriage or not doesn't mean anything. His domineering and firm attitude made Xiang Yu swallow her words with just one sentence. Suddenly, she sized up Mu Yaja again before her gaze finally landed on the branded watch on his wrist. He was dressed very low-key today, and this watch was probably the only thing on him that symbolized his status. Yun Qingmiao also saw the watch on Mu Yaja's wrist. Startled, she leaned close to her mother's ear and whispered, Mom, this man seems to be very rich. He's wearing a Vacheron Constantin watch. This watch costs at least a few 100,000 yuan, and the more expensive ones cost millions. Vacheron Constantin. Her mother was shocked and even more incredulous. She had never heard of this watch. Yun Qingmiao only knew about it because the boss of the factory she worked at wore this watch. She heard that it cost a few 100,000 yuan. It was so expensive that it cost millions. She had never seen it before, though. What watch? One for a few million. At this moment, the way she looked at Mu Yaja changed slightly. There was an unusual sizing up and satisfaction in her eyes. He. Why don't I know that Shishir has a boyfriend? Shishir, this is a major event in your life. Look at your father, he seems to be kept in the dark. Did you not tell him about it? If you ask me, before she could finish her words, Mu Yaja lost his patience and interrupted her. Shishir and I don't need you to worry about our marriage. I've already ordered people to pick an auspicious date, I'll give Shishir a perfect wedding. Once again, Xiang Yu's words were blocked. She had nothing else to say, and her expression was a little awkward. Yun Yeho, who was standing at the side, said, "You talk too much, Xiang Yu. It's not up to you to worry about Shishir's boyfriend." She was embarrassed. Yun Yechen kindly replied, "Hey, don't say that. I'm just concerned about Shishir." Xiang Yu rolled her eyes inwardly. "Care my ass. Who's asking you?" Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli, who were standing at the side, looked at each other and kept quiet. Yun Qinli, in particular, felt even more indignant. "I hate this Yun Shishir, if not for Yun Yecheng's family, she would have gone to university." Now that she did not go to university, she had no choice but to work in the factory with her elder sister. Working 12 hours a day, she only earned 2,000 to 3,000 yuan a month. What about Yun Shishir, though? How did she find such a handsome husband to be? He was tall and handsome, even more handsome than the popular male celebrities on TV. Most importantly, his family background seemed to be quite good. Chapter 1651. What was that saying again? Comparisons were odious indeed. Mu Yaja's phone rang all of a sudden. He walked to the side and picked up the call. On the other end, Minyu informed him that the board of directors had some complaints after he postponed the meeting in the afternoon. Mu Yaja snorted. "Can't you handle this matter?" Minyu wanted to cry. Why did he have to take over this mess? After a moment of silence, he cautiously asked, "Boss, about tonight's dinner, I have something on." "What is it?" "You're meddling too much." Minyu fell silent again. Then, Mu Yaja said, "Book a private room at West Tai Lake Restaurant tonight. I have a guest to entertain." Out of curiosity, Minyu asked, "Who is it?" A certain man said seriously, "My future father-in-law." "Minyu, what's wrong?" "No." He snapped back to his senses. "Okay, boss. I'll arrange it for you right away." Yun Qingmiao stole a few more glances at Mu Yaja's direction and secretly asked her younger sister, "Sister, look at his phone. What brand is it? It looks like the one the boss uses." "You're mistaken. The boss is using Apple's latest model, which costs a few thousand yuan. The one he's using seems to be of an inferior brand." "Is that so? Then, I'm mistaken. I thought he's using Apple." Yun Qingmiao smiled. In their eyes, Apple phones were probably the most identifiable phones on the market. They were expensive and beautiful, and many people would spend months of their salary on them to make themselves look good. When they looked at Mu Yaja's phone again and saw no logo, they thought it was of an inferior brand. They were confused for a moment. This man is wearing such an expensive watch, so why is his phone of an inferior brand? It's too degrading. If Mu Yaja heard this, however, he would burst out laughing. This phone was a global limited edition custom-made by a technology company for high-end customers. Therefore, there was no logo on it, making it luxurious yet low-key. Yun Yecheng suddenly pulled Yun Shishir aside and asked in a hushed voice, Shishir, is what he said true? What? He's your boyfriend? Her father was perplexed. Didn't you tell Dad that he's your university professor? How did he become your boyfriend when Dad wasn't around? When did this happen? In fact, he was well aware of the man's identity. Yun Shishir had lied to him and said that he was a university professor. However, he had seen this man standing next to Yu at the hospital that time. Their facial features were so similar. How could she lie to him? Hence, he guessed that this man was from the Mu family. But the Mu family in the capital, however, he was from a wealthy family with such a high threshold. He was afraid that Shishir would be wronged if she were to be with this man. Dad. Yun Shishir did not know what he was worried about. She hugged his arm coquettishly. I'll explain this to you when we get back, okay? Yun Yecheng's expression softened as he nodded. All right. You're not young anymore, so it's understandable for you to find a partner. However, you must keep your eyes open when you're looking for a partner. If you're going to spend the rest of your life together, you must find someone you like and suitable. Okay. Okay. I'll follow your teachings. Yun Shishir said mischievously. Chapter 1652. Mu Yaja walked up to him and said, Uncle, Shishir and I have prepared a welcome banquet for your return to the capital. It's getting late, let's go. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Yun Yecheng politely declined. Mu Yaja smiled, but his tone was as domineering as ever. I'm all prepared. If you don't go, I'm afraid you'll be letting Shishir down. Yun Shishir chimed in, that's right, Dad. Uncle and Auntie will be here this time, along with my two sisters, so we must treat them well. Dad, just go. Yun Yecheng could not persuade her otherwise. Thus, Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir took his luggage and walked toward the car parked at the entrance. Yun Qingmiao had just reached the entrance when she saw two Mercedes-Benz cars parked there. One was a black Mercedes-Benz AMG, while the other was a white Mercedes-Benz AMG. Yun Qingmiao did not understand cars, but she could recognize the logo. Just the Mercedes-Benz logo alone was enough to shock her, and there were two of them. This time, she was certain that Yun Shishir's boyfriend was not simple. Jealousy grew in her heart. Yun Shishir busied herself with putting their luggage into the car. Yun Yecheng was trying to think of a way to carry his brother into the car when Mu Yaja stopped him. He bent over and, with a little force, easily carried his brother into the back seat of the car. This hormonal action made Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli blush and their hearts beat faster. Yun Shishir put the luggage in place, closed the trunk, and walked to the two sisters with a smile. Sister Qingmiao, Sister Qinli, get in the car. Yun Qingmiao frowned, feeling a little uncomfortable. She did not know why, but standing in front of Yun Shishir, she felt ashamed of her inferiority. Today, Yun Shishir was wearing a socialite blouse, slim-fit trousers, soft UGG boots, and a snow-white trendy jacket. She looked pure and charming. Just like her name, she was gentle and elegant. One look and one could tell that she was a lady from a prestigious family. She exuded an aristocratic aura from head to toe, which made Yun Shishir feel inexplicably inferior. She lowered her head and looked at herself. Her clothes had been washed until they were white, and her shoes were so worn that they could not be seen. Her hair was disheveled from the long train ride, and her skin was tanned and rough due to long-term exposure to the sun. There was an indescribable sadness and envy. Earlier, when Yun Shishir addressed her as Sister Qingmiao, it made her feel uncomfortable. Yun Shishir, that name. Poetic and artistic. She then looked at her name, Yun Qingmiao, which was uncouth and unpleasant to the ears. Why was the name Yun Yeho gave her so uncouth? When Yun Shishir saw her expression, she frowned suspiciously. What's wrong? Don't call me by my name. Why? Yun Shishir was baffled. Your name is so nice. It's so embarrassing that my name is so uncouth and unpleasant, retorted Yun Qingmiao. Yun Shishir smiled. No, I think Sister Qingmiao's name is very nice. Hee hee. Don't try to coax me. It's so embarrassing. I think that names are given by parents, so no matter what I'm called, I think it's nice. Yun Shishir gave him a serious look. Chapter 1653. Hee hee. Yun Yecheng's face was flushed red. When they got into the car, Yun Qingmiao pointed at Mu Yaja's car and asked, Shishir, can Qinli and I sit in this car? Sure. You can sit anywhere you want. Since both cars were spacious, it was not a problem for them to sit together. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli, however, were unwilling to do so. They wanted to sit in Mu Yaja's car, so Yun Yeho, Yun Yecheng, and Xiang Yu sat in Yun Shishir's car. The two sisters, on the other hand, sat in Mu Yaja's car. The moment Yun Qinli got in, she was shocked by the spacious interior. Every detail of the Mercedes-Benz Gosang, an imported SUV, was high-end. Leather seats, panoramic sunroof, and streamlined body, thus, when the sisters got into the car, they felt a little uneasy and restrained. Somehow, they felt that this car was too high-end and expensive. The car started moving slowly. Mu Yaja kept his eyes fixed on the front as he held the steering wheel and led the way. Yun Shishir's car followed behind. He drove a little slowly, seemingly taking into account that she was inexperienced in driving, so he did not drive too fast for fear that she would not be able to keep up with him. After getting used to it for a while, Yun Qingmiao finally relaxed her body. She leaned forward slightly and leaned on the back of the driver's seat. Through the rearview mirror, she silently sized up Mu Yaja's side profile. He had an arrogant lower jaw and flawless facial features. He was handsome and resolute, and his eyes exuded an incomparably noble and arrogant aura. She could not help feeling a little infatuated. She had never seen such a handsome man before, especially this man. Not only was he good-looking, but he also came from a wealthy family and was very charming. No woman could resist such extraordinary charm in front of him. She was no exception. Her heart was stirred. Thus, she asked with a grin, "What's your name?" Yun Qinli, who saw that her sister actually dared to strike up a conversation with this unapproachable man, was instantly interested and moved forward. Mu Yaja stared at him, but his voice was cold. "In the future, you can call me brother-in-law." "Brother-in-law?" Yun Qingmiao laughed dryly at that. "That's not very nice, is it? You're not even engaged yet, so it's not appropriate for me to call you brother-in-law now." Mu Yaja frowned slightly but did not say anything. "Tell me your name, I don't even know your name." Yun Qinli also chimed in, "That's right." Mu Yaja suddenly said, "Pay attention to your seats." Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli exchanged glances before turning to look at their seats curiously, not understanding what he meant. "Ah. What do you mean? I don't understand." Mu Yaja said, "Seat belt." Yun Qingmiao grabbed the seat belt, but she was still confused. "What's wrong with the seat belt?" "Fasten it." Yun Qingmiao did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Why are you fastening the seat belt?" Mu Yaja raised a brow impatiently and then turned the steering wheel abruptly, making a sharp turn. Caught off guard, the two sisters bumped into each other and nearly fell out of their seats. When the car returned to normal, the two sisters raised their heads in embarrassment and quickly fastened their seatbelts, not daring to say another word. This way, even if Yun Qingmiao wanted to talk to him, she could not do so due to the seatbelt. He did not like women other than Yun Shishir to be so close to him. Chapter 1654. The car continued its journey. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli whispered, "Shishir's boyfriend doesn't seem to be easy to get along with." That can't be, right? I saw him standing beside Shishir just now, and his gaze was very gentle. Why is it that now? Look at him. Yun Qinli gestured at the man in the rearview mirror. He was looking straight ahead with an aloof expression and some lingering fear. Along the way, Mu Yaja did not speak or respond to them. Even when the two tried to strike up a conversation, he did not respond. He gives off an unapproachable feeling. Yun Qinli suddenly whispered. I think he must be a henpecked husband. A typical henpecked husband who only listens to his wife. Look at him, he's cold and indifferent when other women talk to him. It's obvious that he doesn't want to talk to us. Is that so? Yun Qingmiao clicked her tongue in a sarcastic manner. Sure. Yun Qinli pinched her in trepidation. Can you keep your voice down? Oh. It's fine. Yun Qingmiao continued to size him up through the rearview mirror in a daze after saying that. All of a sudden, she muttered indignantly, sigh. Comparisons are odious. Why didn't I meet such a good man? Why does she have to encounter so many good things? If I had such a boyfriend, I'd be overjoyed. Yun Qinli said unhappily, I really don't know what kind of fate she has. I don't think she's that good. She doesn't deserve this man. Really? Maybe he's just playing with her and it won't work out in the end. She lowered her voice, thinking that Mu Yaja could not hear her. Unexpectedly, Mu Yaja's hearing was so amazing that he heard their whispers loud and clear. Impatient, he reached out to change the air conditioner's gear and blew the cold air into the back seat. He was cold resistant, and since he had turned off the air conditioner vent in the driver's seat, he could not feel the cold air. The back seat was not so comfortable, though. Cold air was coming out of the room, blowing. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli only realized later that the car was a little cold. They hugged their bodies and shivered. It's so cold, why is it so cold in the car? She asked gloomily. Yun Qinli also knew that she was shivering. She said with a strange expression, that's strange. Why did the car suddenly become cold? After a pause, she discussed with Mu Yaja, why don't we turn on the heater? It's too cold. However, Mu Yaja said, the heater is broken. Yun Qinli, how could it be broken? Oh my god. Thus, Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli kept blowing cold air all the way. Min Yu had arranged for him to stay at Wenbi Villa Hotel. When they got out of the car at the hotel, Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli were hugging each other's shoulders. They were clearly freezing. After a certain two-faced man got out of the car, he swept them a glance before gracefully slamming the car door and walking toward Yun Shishir's car. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli looked at his back view. They opened their mouths, wanting to say something, but hesitated. Xiang Yu walked up to them and touched Yun Qingmiao's hand, which was cold to the touch, which gave her a shock. Why are your hands so cold? Yun Qingmiao said aggrievedly, the heater in the car is broken, and we've been freezing the whole way. Shielding her daughter, Xiang Yu said angrily, what lousy car is this? How can the heater be broken? Chapter 1655. Yun Qinli was a little puzzled. Earlier, she seemed to have seen the air conditioning on the dashboard display. Did he turn it on purpose? She had her suspicions. Mu Yaja had originally booked the Westlake Thai restaurant, which was located in the Wenbi Villa Hotel. It was considered a high-end restaurant. Although it could only be considered high-end, the dishes in the restaurant were sumptuous and delicious. After stabilizing the car, Yun Shishir helped Yun Yecheng out of the car. As for Yun Yeho, he was naturally carried out of the car by Mu Yaja, who then pushed his wheelchair into the hotel. At first, Yun Yeho was a little restless and politely declined the offer. From their first meeting, he could tell that this man was of noble status. He was either rich or powerful, so he felt somewhat flattered to have him push his wheelchair. Mu Yaja, however, simply said, you're not in good health, so just sit still. You don't have to worry about anything else. Hearing this, Yun Yeho did not say anything else. His flushed face showed that he was in a good mood. Yun Shishir snickered when she saw this. This fellow is quite good at doing things. Inside the hotel, the restaurant manager naturally did not dare to delay the arrival of a distinguished guest. He led the waiters to line up at the entrance to welcome him. The lobby manager could not hide his joy and excitement when he saw Mu Yaja. He immediately went up to him and was about to greet him when Mu Yaja stopped him in time. Don't make a fuss. I'm just here for a meal. In other words, he hoped that the man would keep a low profile and not address him as Chairman Mu, lest he was bluffing. The lobby manager kept quiet when he heard this. Naturally, he understood the underlying meaning of his words and nodded with a smile. Chairman Mu, the private room is ready for you. This way, please. Even though he was told to keep a low profile, he still had to address him as Chairman Mu. Otherwise, it would be breaking the rules. He gave the waiter beside him a look, and the latter immediately stepped forward to help Mu Yaja push the wheelchair into the elevator. The elevator in the hotel was not big, so when Yun Shishir stepped inside, it was already overloaded. Seeing this, Yun Qingmiao giggled. Shishir, why don't you walk up? It's only the 5th floor anyway. Yun Shishir nodded. All right. Then I'll walk up. You guys enter the private room first. Just as the elevator doors were about to close, Mu Yaja suddenly stepped out. Yun Shishir was stunned. What are you doing? Behind him, Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli were puzzled. Why are you going out? There's still room for one more. Mu Yaja ignored the people behind him. He lowered his head and glanced at Yun Shishir. He reached out, took her hand, and interlocked his fingers with hers. I'll go with you. Yun Shishir blushed and said in a low voice, why didn't I realize you were so clingy? Behind them, Yun Qingmiao's expression changed. She wanted to say something, but the elevator doors had already closed. In the narrow space, Yun Qingmiao was obviously in a bad mood. Her mother glanced at her and chided, what's wrong with that long face? Nothing. Yun Qinli suddenly asked Yun Yeqing out of curiosity, Uncle, what's the background of Shishir's boyfriend? I saw the lobby manager treating him very politely just now. It's as if he's very powerful, calling him Chairman Mu in a very flattering manner. Chapter 1656. Yun Yeqing let out a dry chuckle but did not reply. His mother, however, interjected from the side. Brother Cheng, since he's Shishir's boyfriend, I think you should really find out more about him. Shishir is so young and pretty, if she gets abducted by some unknown rascal, you'll have a lot to cry about. That's right. Uncle, you should find out more about him. Yun Qingmiao chimed in from the side. Yun Yeho, who was in his wheelchair, clicked his tongue and reprimanded, why are you poking your nose into other people's business? He's Shishir's boyfriend, why are you all so concerned about him? You. Yun Yeho. What's wrong with you today? Why are you always pouring cold water on me? His wife retorted in dissatisfaction, unwilling to be outdone. Yun Yeqing tried to smooth things over. Oh, dear. Today is a rare happy day, let's not bicker. Yun Yeho kept quiet when he heard that. His wife snorted and muttered something under her breath. Her voice was so low that no one could hear what she was saying. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir soon arrived at the private room. However, before the two could take their seats, Yun Qingmiao asked Mu Yaja curiously, I heard them calling you Chairman Mu earlier. He. Are you a big boss? Yun Shishir furrowed her brows in discomfort. Why is this woman paying so much attention to Mu Yaja right from the start? She cast a sidelong glance at a certain man, but her brows relaxed. It was not surprising, though. After all, this man was a magnet for bees and butterflies. Putting aside his handsome looks and impressive family background, just his noble aura alone was enough to move one's heart. He was indeed not someone to be worry-free. Mu Yaja looked up at Yun Qingmiao. Initially, he wanted to ignore her, but with so many pairs of eyes watching, he could not appear too cold. Hence, with a smile, he said casually, everyone in this hotel calls me boss. Yun Qingmiao had a feeling that he was hiding something. Just as she was about to question him, Xiang Yu beat her to it. I heard the lobby manager calling you Chairman Mu earlier. He. I still don't know your name, so can I call you Xiao Mu? Mu Yaja nodded. Xiang Yu smiled in satisfaction. Yun Shishir, on the other hand, snickered. Xiao Mu. This title really made one not know whether to laugh or cry. If all of Disheng's subordinates knew that their boss outside, they would be in the wind, they would be in the wind. Yun Yeho quietly sized him up and exclaimed in admiration, "Xiao Mu, you're really tall and handsome. Plus, you're very polite too." Xiang Yu added, "That's right. To be able to find someone like Xiao Mu, there must be smoke rising from your ancestors' graves." Yun Shishir frowned. Her aunt's words were inappropriate and should not be said in front of so many people. However, after thinking about it, she did not pursue the matter. She heard that this auntie had not studied for many years and was not particular about her speech, so she could only let it pass. Yun Yecheng, on the other hand, remained silent. From the moment Mu Yaja entered the room, he had been sizing him up without a word, as if he were facing a formidable enemy. Today, when he returned to the capital, he did not expect that a prospective son-in-law would appear out of nowhere. This caught him a little off guard. Thus, he had yet to digest it until now. Chapter 1657. As they exchanged pleasantries, the dishes were served one by one. Everyone chatted as they ate. For some reason, though, Yun Shishir had a feeling that the topic at the table revolved around Mu Yaja. Even though Mu Yaja was unwilling to pay attention to it, he still maintained a courteous look on his face. She asked, "Little Mu, how old are you this year?" Mu Yaja answered, 28. She exclaimed, "Oh, dear. I really couldn't tell at all. I thought that you're only 22 years old today. That means that you've already had some aspirations of entering society." Mu Yaja answered, "I started working when I was 20. She lamented, "Does that mean that you didn't make it to university?" Yun Qinli replied, "Sigh. I didn't go to university, either. I got in, but I couldn't afford the tuition fees, so it was delayed." As she spoke, she did not forget to secretly shoot a resentful glance at her father and Yun Shishir. Yun Shishir, who was busy taking care of her father, did not notice her sister's gaze. Mu Yaja answered, "I did go to university, but I finished all my studies when I was 19. Her eyes widened in shock. "Which university are you from?" Mu Yaja answered, "Stanford." Her eyes widened. "Why are you tearing up the blanket?" Mu Yaja patiently answered, "Stanford." She frowned. "I've never heard of that university." Yun Qinli, who was standing at the side, felt a little embarrassed and quickly tried to smooth things over. "Mom, he's talking about Stanford, a very famous university in America." "Stanford. Oh. I see." She rubbed her hands together uneasily, clearly feeling a little embarrassed. Yun Yeho suddenly said, "Shishir, you should be 23 years old today, right?" Yun Shishir looked up and smiled. "Uncle, you must have remembered wrongly. I'm 24 this year." 24. Yun Yeho slapped his forehead. "Oh, dear. I remembered your birthday wrongly." At the side, Yun Yecheng said, "Have you forgotten? When you came over, Shishir hadn't even gone to college yet." Yun Yeho said, "So, Shishir, you're a year older than Qinli. Qinli should call you big sister." Yun Qinli was surprised. "Shishir, you're older than me by a year." "Aya, what a blunder. Sister Shishir, I'll have to call you sister from now on." Soon, the topic was back on track. Alas, the two sisters still paid more attention to Mu Yaja. From time to time, they would ask questions such as, "Do you have a house in the capital? Do you have siblings? And, what are your parents' jobs?" Mu Yaja answered them one by one. However, he didn't answer in detail. Yun Qingmiao, on the other hand, was calculating in her heart. Good family background, a house in the capital, a stable job, and a high income. He's a pretty good man. Who knows, he might even be a novice. After all, the watch on his wrist can't be fake. His family must be very rich to be able to afford a 1,000,000 yuan watch. Yun Qingmiao took another look at Yun Shishir and secretly sized her up. It was no wonder she could find such a good man. She's good-looking, sweet, and knows how to coax people. Such a personality is the most pleasing to men. Yun Shishir could only feel her sister's piercing gaze on her, which made her feel a little uncomfortable for a moment. He was also secretly calculating in his heart. It seemed that he had to arrange another place for them to stay. Chapter 1658. It was better not to bring relatives over for the time being. They would start gossiping again if they saw the two children at home. She could not be bothered to deal with them. She was not afraid of getting pregnant out of wedlock, rather, she was afraid that this auntie and her two sisters would say something hurtful in front of the children. Even if it was unintentional, she would not allow it. Hence, after dinner, Yun Shishir decided to arrange for them to stay in a hotel for a few nights. She would make proper arrangements for them once she found another place to stay. Driving to the hotel, she arranged 2 rooms for her mother, Yun Qingmiao, and Yun Shishir. The latter asked curiously, why are we staying in a hotel? He. Mom, the housing prices in the capital are so expensive. Sister Shishir's house is small and can't accommodate so many people, so she arranged for us to stay in a hotel first, said Yun Qinli. Her mother smiled at that. If you ask me, the capital isn't as comfortable as our hometown. There are so many rooms back home, it's the same for all of us. The housing prices in the city are indeed frighteningly expensive. Yun Shishir could only say, Auntie, Sister Qingmiao, and Qinli, let's just make do for tonight. I happen to be free tomorrow, so I'll bring you guys to look at the houses and arrange for your accommodations before making other arrangements. Her mother nodded but suddenly asked, how much does a night in a hotel cost? I don't have much money on me. She had a bank book with her, and it contained tens of thousands of yuan that her father had returned to her. She could not bear to spend it, so she deliberately said that. Yun Shishir said politely, I've already paid for your rooms, so you guys can stay here without worries. Okay. After leading them to their respective rooms, Yun Shishir was finally able to leave. She then drove the 2 back to Shangdi Walk. Along the way, Yun Yeho dozed off in the back seat. He was indeed tired from the long journey. Yun Yecheng, on the other hand, was not sleepy. Taking advantage of his brother's nap, he sat in the front passenger seat and suddenly turned to ask, Shishir, how far have you gone with him? Dad, what do you mean by that? Have you slept with him? Yun Yecheng paused for a moment before asking bluntly, did you sleep together? Yun Shishir blushed. After a moment of silence, she nodded awkwardly. Yun Yecheng's face turned ashen when he heard that, but he could not bear to reprimand her. Instead, he sternly said, Shishir, it's not that Dad wants to chide you. You're too muddle-headed. You haven't gotten married and you haven't even gotten your marriage certificate. It's not right for you to be living together. Dad, it's not that Dad doesn't know some things. He's just pretending not to know. I know very well who that man is. Yun Yecheng suddenly said in a deep voice, his eyes full of meaning. Yun Shishir looked at him. Dad, what do you mean? Yun Yecheng did not intend to hide it from her and went straight to the point. He's Yu's biological father, isn't he? How did you know? Yun Shishir turned pale with fright. Yun Yecheng did not know whether to laugh or cry as he asked, do you really think that Dad's eyesight is bad because of his old age? Who would believe that he's not Yu's father when he's standing next to him? Yun Shishir was speechless. How could she have neglected this point? In fact, Mu Yaja and Yu did resemble each other, but, sigh. Chapter 1659. Shishir, you're not young anymore. There are some things that I shouldn't say to you anymore. You should know better. If you two have already registered your marriage, I won't interfere with your marriage. Who knows if he's sincere to you, though? In today's society, a man's heart is like a needle at the bottom of the ocean. You may think that he's sincere to you, but it's hard to tell. Who knows if he'll be the one you'll end up spending the rest of your life with? Her father's words were well-intentioned and persuasive, but each of them was like a gem. Yun Shishir bit her lower lip as she stared ahead with her hands on the steering wheel. It was not unreasonable for him to say that. She could empathize with his concerns. As a father, it was understandable for him to be worried that his daughter would be cheated by an outsider. It was just that he did not know Mu Yaja well, so it was understandable for him to have such worries. He said, "After registering your marriage, I won't be able to control what happens between the two of you. However, before you register your marriage, you have to be mindful of your chastity, so you're not allowed to live with him until then. Do you understand?" Yun Shishir nodded her head. "Also, I have a question that I want to ask you personally. Answer me honestly." Yun Shishir replied, "Go ahead, Dad. Do you really like that man? Or is it because you've given birth to his child that you're willing to make do with him? If it were the latter, he might not agree to it. A marriage made for the sake of a child would not be a happy one. He wanted her to be happy and healthy. That was enough for him. He did not ask for riches or fame. All he wanted was for her to be able to choose the man she loved and spend the rest of her life in bliss." At the traffic light junction, she stepped on the brakes and turned to look at him seriously before nodding her head solemnly. The car stopped in the garage. As Mu Yaja walked over, he could feel Yun Yecheng's vigilant gaze on his back, which was like a prick. He turned to look at Yun Yecheng, only to see the latter regain his composure in an instant. Mu Yaja didn't think too much about it and carried Yun Yeho to the wheelchair. At the side, Yun Yecheng reminded her repeatedly, "Be careful," Mu Yaja said, "Don't worry, I can handle it." Yun Yecheng nodded, but his mind seemed to be elsewhere. When they entered the house, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen heard the commotion and rushed to the door enthusiastically, only to be stunned when they saw Yun Yecheng and Yun Yeho, whom they had never met before. "Grandfather, who is this?" Yu Yu asked in surprise. Yun Yecheng was equally surprised to see another tall child standing beside Yu Yu. This child looked similar to Yu Yu. He stared blankly for a moment before he suddenly reacted. Back when Shishir was a surrogate mother for the Muse, she was pregnant with twins. However, 7 years ago, Yu Yu stopped breathing when she was born. The Muse came and took away the other child, leaving behind the missing Yu Yu. This child was probably the other healthy child. Xiao Yichen looked at Yu Yu, then at Yun Yecheng, and finally at Yun Yeho in the wheelchair. Chapter 1660. Xiao Yichen was also quick-witted and had a sweet tongue. Hence, he followed Yu Yu and enthusiastically called him Grandpa. This greeting almost melted Yun Yecheng's heart. He squatted down in front of him and hugged him. "Little guy, what's your name?" Xiao Yichen was not at all afraid of strangers. His lips curled into a confident smile. "My name is Mu Yichen. Grandpa, you can call me Xiao Yichen." "Xiao Yichen. You're so obedient. So obedient." Yun Yecheng lovingly caressed his tender face, but his heart was filled with emotions. 7 years ago, he had brushed shoulders with this child. Back then, when the child came out of the delivery room, he was wrapped in swaddling clothes and wailing loudly. The Mu family was very strict in protecting him, with bodyguards in black leading the way. At the entrance of the delivery room, there were nurses from the Mu group's private hospital waiting to take the child away. As he passed by, he caught a glimpse of the child's wrinkled and red face and his tender little hands waving about in the swaddling clothes. At that time, he had the urge to snatch the child away from them, but he knew that such an outcome would be terrible. Hence, he restrained his impulse. Other than that one time, they had not seen each other for 7 years. Yun Yecheng could not help but size him up seriously. His small face was fair and translucent, as if it was carved out of jade. It was especially adorable, pure, and charming. His eyes were similar to Yun Shishir's, but his silhouette resembled his father's handsomeness. For a moment, Yun Yecheng was touched. He could not help but hug the child's shoulders and caress him over and over again. Yun Yeho, on the other hand, felt incredulous when he saw this. Who were these two little guys? Their eyes were very similar to Yun Shishir's. However, thinking about it, he felt that something was amiss. Yun Shishir was only 24 years old and unmarried. Where did these children come from? Yun Yeho looked at the two children and then at Yun Shishir, but out of courtesy, he did not ask any questions. Yun Shishir moved the luggage into the cloakroom and began to get busy. Mu Yaja was carrying his luggage through the door when he saw this scene. He was stunned for a moment before he said in a deep voice, Xiao Yichen, come over and help. Seeing this, Yun Yecheng shielded the child and immediately said, I'll do it. Let me do it. The luggage is too heavy for a child to carry. Xiao Yichen stopped him out of filial piety. No need. Grandpa, let me do it. You might not be as strong as me. As he spoke, he ran briskly in front of Mu Yaja, picked up a bag in each hand, and sprinted towards the cloakroom. Leaving behind a horrified Yun Yecheng, this child, divine power. So strong. This package weighed at least 20 pounds, maybe even 30 pounds. Yet, this child was carrying one in each hand, this was too heaven-defying. Yun Yecheng was truly shocked. Mu Yaja looked at Yu again. The latter's expression froze before he pretended to hold his stomach and said, Daddy, my stomach hurts. With that, he pretended to hold his stomach and went to his room to slack off. Mu Yaja, this rascal. Can't he find a decent excuse to slack off? After the luggage was settled, Yun Yecheng pushed Yun Yeho into the room. As soon as they entered the room, Yun Yeho hurriedly asked about the two children. Chapter 1661. Yun Yecheng did not hide anything from him and recounted in detail how, 7 years ago, the Yun family was facing bankruptcy and was burdened with debt. She had done such a foolish thing for the sake of the Yun family. Yun Yeho was so touched that he could not speak a word. He did not expect Yun Shishir to do so much for the Yun family, though. In his heart, he had a very good impression of this child. On the other side, Mu Yaja was about to go to bed when Yun Shishir stopped him at the door and said, You can't stay here tonight. What's wrong? Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes dangerously. Are you chasing me away? Yun Shishir blushed and explained, I don't mean to chase you away. Don't misunderstand. Then, what do you mean by not staying here tonight? Mu Yaja sized her up and asked in a deep voice, Woman, are you thinking of rebelling? Yun Shishir lowered her head and hesitated for a while before she stammered, My dad just said, we haven't registered our marriage yet, so it's not official yet, so, it's inevitable that people will gossip about us if we stay together before we get married. Why don't you, go back first? Mu Yaja snorted, but his tone revealed his dissatisfaction and domineering. Who dares to gossip about you? Whoever dares to gossip can come forward and try. Yun Shishir glared at him. All right. It's late now, you should go back and rest early. I'll wash up and get ready to rest, too. Mu Yaja furrowed his brows, his eyes showing his displeasure. This is my house. He added, I've already proposed. Could it be that this was not official enough? Yun Shishir explained, but, a proposal doesn't mean marriage. We haven't registered our marriage yet, so we're not husband and wife. It's fine if my dad isn't around, but now that he's home, he'll definitely be afraid of me being gossiped about if he sees us sleeping in the same room. He's old, so his thinking must be a little old-fashioned, but it's for our own good. Mu Yaja, he held on to the door frame to block the door and questioned her, It's so late now, where do you want me to stay? That's true. Although he had a lot of properties under his name, he had been living here most of the time. He rarely returned to the Mu family. Mu Xing's health was not good, so he would visit him occasionally, but he rarely stayed at home. The other houses were cold and cheerless. There was no hot water or electricity, let alone a change of clothes. She actually wanted to chase him away. She pointed to the ceiling all of a sudden. Why don't you go to the second floor tonight? Mu Yaja's brows sank as he spat out a few words through gritted teeth. Yun, sure. I don't care. With that, she gave him a shove and locked the door with a bang. She d*mn it. It looked like this silly woman was really determined to keep him at the door. Mu Yaja's face was filled with displeasure when the two little lads mocked him from behind. Yu, oh, Daddy, so pitiful. Xiao Chen, so pitiful. The man's face turned green. He turned around abruptly and saw Yu and Xiao Chen standing together in the corridor. They had the tacit understanding to cover their mouths with their hands and secretly mock him. Yu, tisk, tsk. It's so pitiful no matter how I look at it. Chapter 1662. Yu, poor daddy, you're exiled just like that. Xiao Chen, exiled just like that. Yu, how does it feel to be exiled to the borders? Xiao Chen, how does it feel? Yu, does it feel sad and wronged? Xiao Chen, does it feel wronged? Yu, he. Serves you right. Xiao Chen, he. Serves you right. The two little rascals sang the same tune and mocked him mercilessly. Mu Yaja's face fell instantly. Are you tired of living? Mu Yaja clenched his fists, making a few strange sounds. Or are you saying that you're so capable that you dare to make sarcastic remarks about Daddy? Xiao Chen was afraid of his expression and gulped nervously. He recalled the suffering he had suffered at the hands of Mu Yaja in the past. Thus, he admitted defeat and hid behind Yu in fear. However, Yu didn't fall for this trick. She wasn't afraid of his threats and wasn't afraid of his expression at all. Since she had her mommy's support, she put her hands on her hips and looked at him smugly. Daddy, it's very tasteless of you to threaten two 7-year-old children. Mu Yaja, this sharp-tongued little rascal was unmoved by force or persuasion. He narrowed his eyes and said, go back to your room and sleep. Daddy, why are you so fierce? Yu covered her mouth and snickered. She said mercilessly, hey, look, I was being kind and wanted to say that if you don't know how to make a blanket, I could be kind and help you make a blanket. But you're so fierce, I'm not going to help you. After she finished speaking, Yu held Xiao Chen's hand and swaggered back to their room. She closed the door with a bang. Mu Yaja clenched his fists. This kid, his ability to hit someone when they are down was not small. There was a master bedroom on the second floor. However, there was no blanket, only a mattress. Mu Yaja had no choice but to fend for himself. He rummaged through the cabinets and took out sheets, blankets, and a set of silk quilts. After tidying them up, he went to the bathroom, took a hot bath, and went to sleep. There's a phrase called sleepless nights. These words were vividly reflected. Throughout the night, a certain man tossed and turned, but still could not fall asleep. In the dark room, the man opened his eyes that were as cold as the moon and stared at the ceiling, but he felt inexplicably irritated. Perhaps it was because he was used to having her by his side during the long nights. Without her by his side, it was easy for him to lose sleep. During the 2 weeks that she was on set, whenever he couldn't sleep, he would get up, smoke a few cigarettes, read a few emails, and go through a few reports. He would only feel sleepy when he lay in bed at dawn. And last night, with her by his side, he slept exceptionally peacefully. Then, what about her? Would she get used to not having him by her side? Or would she fall asleep peacefully as usual? He stretched out his arms a little dejectedly, propped himself up, and laid on his side. Yun Shusher's hazy sleeping face seemed to be reflected in his eyes. He couldn't help but reach out to touch it, but it instantly disappeared into thin air. He rubbed his forehead in frustration, feeling extremely frustrated. The next morning, Yun Shusher had just finished washing up. When she walked out of the bedroom, she saw Mu Yaja sitting in the living room, smoking a cigarette and flipping through the newspaper. He leaned against the sofa lazily. His neat black hair was slightly messed up by the morning breeze outside the window, covering his pair of deep eyes. As a result, she couldn't see his expression clearly. She was stunned. You're up so early. When Mu Yaja heard her, he raised his head, put down the newspaper, and walked towards her. Chapter 1663. His first sentence was filled with an unquestionable power. Yun Shusher had just woken up, but faced with his words, she was a little confused. In a daze, she replied instinctively, in the drawer of the TV cabinet in the bedroom. Why? Mu Yaja walked around her and went straight into the room. Yun Shishir was even more confused as she followed him into the room. However, she saw Mu Yaja squatting in front of the TV cabinet, pulling open the drawer and rummaging through the cabinets. Finally, he found her household register among a stack of documents. What do you want to do with my household register? Yun Shishir furrowed her brows as she stared at his cold and deep face. She was a little guarded, but after racking her brains, she still couldn't figure out what he was trying to do. Mu Yaja ignored her words and flipped open the household register until he reached her page. Then, he grabbed the household register in his hands and suddenly stood up. He was so tall and straight that it made the room seem small and narrow in an instant. Yun Shishir saw him holding the household register tightly and was even more puzzled. She couldn't figure out what he was trying to do so mysteriously early in the morning. However, she saw him walk in front of her and get close to her. He lowered his head and asked, "Where is your identity card?" It's in my wallet." Yun Shishir didn't understand, but she still answered obediently. "Where is your wallet?" Yun Shishir blinked. In the glove compartment of the car." Mu Yaja suddenly grabbed her and walked out of the door in big strides. Yun Shishir struggled for a while and asked with furrowed brows, "Mu Yaja, you're being so mysterious early in the morning. I can't figure out what you're trying to do." "Follow me." Yun Shishir was stunned and asked in confusion, "Follow you where?" He turned his head abruptly and stared into her eyes as he enunciated each word clearly. "I propose to you, HM." Yun Shishir nodded her head belatedly. "Yeah, you promised me." "N?" Mu Yaja said again, but his handsome eyes flashed with a touch of light. Yun Shishir pursed her lips, but there was a hint of shyness on her face. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she said, "Why are you asking this? I don't understand the meaning behind your words. Answer me first." Mu Yaja paused. His tone was so strong that no one dared to defy him. "You promised me, Yes. Yes." Yun Shishir was stunned. She felt that the man standing in front of her seemed to be possessed early in the morning. When she woke up, she saw him sitting on the sofa, flipping through the newspaper. She saw that he looked a little tired, but she couldn't figure out when he had slept last night. Hearing this, Mu Yaja suddenly gave a deep smile and raised his brow elegantly, forming a beautiful crease between his brows. "Then follow me." With that said, he held her hand and was about to walk out of the door. His strides were extremely long, and he walked with his head held high, as if he couldn't wait to do something. Yun Shishir found it difficult to keep up with him. She stumbled and staggered a few steps. She said in annoyance, "What exactly is it?" "To the Civil Affairs Bureau." These 4 short words made Yun Shishir completely confused. What? Civil Affairs Bureau? Perhaps his decision came too suddenly, so she was stunned for a long time. Suddenly, she asked a question very foolishly, "Why are we going to the Civil Affairs Bureau?" Chapter 1664. Her question was simply too silly. Mu Yaja lost his cool at once. With a playful look in his eyes, he could not help but ask, "Register our marriage?" What else could they do at the Civil Affairs Bureau? Yun Shishir gaped in shock. This was such a sudden decision that she was completely unprepared. Hence, when Mu Yaja said the words "register our marriage," she was left with nothing but shock and confusion. She wasn't ready yet. It was so sudden, she was completely unprepared for it. "What's wrong?" Mu Yaja saw her hesitant look and narrowed his handsome eyes slightly in displeasure. "You're not willing." Yun Shishir immediately replied, "No. I'm not unwilling." "Then, why do you have such an expression?" Yun Shishir answered truthfully, "I'm not ready." She suddenly thought of something and asked quizzically, "Have you checked the almanac?" "The almanac?" Mu Yaja raised a brow. Yun Shishir smiled. "You might not know common sense." Although we're only registering our marriage and not holding an official wedding, we still have to check the almanac to register our marriage. If it says that today isn't a good day to get married, then it means that it's not a good day to register our marriage. Mu Yaja, however, curled his lips. I've already checked it. Yun Shishir was even more dumbfounded. Ah. He knows how to check the almanac. Yun Shishir suddenly looked at the newspaper on the low table in the living room and suddenly realized why he was sitting on the sofa and flipping through the newspaper early in the morning. So this man had already prepared everything. Mu Yaja waved the household register in his hand and smiled. Come with me. Not allowing her to refuse, he held her hand and walked out of the door. After Yun Yechen got out of bed, he first helped his younger brother wash up. When he walked into the living room, he saw Yu reading the newspaper on the sofa. His head was bent as he flipped through the pages, but when he reached the corner of a page, his lips suddenly curled into a smile. Yun Yechen asked, Yu, is your mommy awake yet? Yu lowered her head and flipped through the newspaper. Then, she looked up and smiled brightly. It's time to go out. He asked curiously, Where did you go? Yu thought for a moment and smiled. He probably went to the Civil Affairs Bureau. He closed the newspaper. The moment the wind blew in from outside the window, it lifted a corner of the newspaper. On the page of the almanac, it showed, marriage. Mu Yaja drove to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Along the way, Yun Shishir still had a mysterious and subtle feeling. In fact, it was a little unbelievable. Therefore, when the two of them arrived at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau and got out of the car, their heads felt heavy and their feet felt light. They were still in a daze. She had an inexplicable feeling. She felt as if she was a duck that had been forced onto a perch and was at the mercy of others. She was inexplicably dragged to the Civil Affairs Bureau, clearly with a bit of coercion. Although the marriage partner standing next to her was handsome and had a prominent family background, and just 2 days ago, he had proposed to her, and she had gladly accepted. If it were any other woman, she would be so happy that she would be on cloud 9. However, perhaps it was because he was too sudden and overbearing that she felt as if she was being coerced. She did not know where this impulse of his came from, but it was like a whirlwind that caught her off guard. Could she regret it? Yun Shishir thought with tears streaming down her face. Chapter 1665. It wasn't that Yun Shishir wasn't looking forward to the marriage, it was just that it was too rushed and it made her feel unreal. When they were queuing up to register, Yun Shishir only felt that there was a dark cloud above her head. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled from time to time. The strong wind blew and messed her up. She sat on the chair as if her soul had left her body and she didn't look human at all. Her dispirited state was a stark contrast to the group of happy young couples around her. Mu Yaja sat beside her and quietly flipped through a financial magazine. His handsome side profile attracted countless envious gazes. It was just that. Everyone glanced at the woman beside him with tears on her face, and their hearts broke out in cold sweat. Was this a forced marriage? No matter how they looked at it, she didn't look like someone who was here to register their marriage willingly. But if it was a forced marriage, from their point of view, it was more reasonable for the man to be the one being forced into the marriage. They couldn't help but be puzzled. Today was probably a good day as there seemed to be a lot of people who came to register their marriage at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Yun Shishir was wearing sunglasses and was fully armed to avoid the inquisitive gazes of the crowd. Perhaps it was because most of the young people who came to register their marriage were immersed in joy, hence they didn't notice the subtle atmosphere between Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja. She was in a daze when she suddenly heard some movement beside her. Turning her head, she saw Mu Yaja slowly getting up. She looked at him suspiciously, not knowing what he was going to do. Could it be that he was going back on his word? Or could it be that he also realized that marriage was such a solemn matter and shouldn't be decided so hastily on a whim? Mu Yaja glanced at her and said plainly, "The ID card is in the car. I'll go get it. Wait for me here." Her hopes were dashed. Yun Shishir nodded woodenly. After he walked away, a woman beside her curiously leaned over and asked excitedly, "He's your man?" "Guess." Yun Shusher wore her sunglasses and gave an ambiguous answer. "You should be here to register your marriage." When Yun Shusher heard this, the corners of her mouth turned down and she didn't seem to be happy about registering their marriage. The woman exclaimed, "Eh? I see that you and that handsome guy are both very young. It seems like you're here to get your marriage certificate. But looking at your expression, it seems like you're here to register a divorce." Yun Shusher was speechless. The reason why the woman said that was probably because she looked like a resentful woman who had been abandoned. The woman's eyes lit up. "However, your man is really handsome. At first glance, I thought it was a movie star." "Oh, you're even more handsome than movie stars." The man sitting next to the woman was a little unhappy. Hey, your husband is sitting next to you. How dare you praise another man in front of me?" The woman immediately hugged his arm coquettishly. "Hee, of course you're the most handsome in my heart." The two people in front of her were flirting with each other happily. Yun Shusher was caught off guard and was fed a mouthful of dog food. The correct way to get a marriage certificate should be like this. But just now, Muyaja had been sitting next to her without saying a word. His eyes were like torches as he stared at the service counter with a serious expression. He didn't have the sweetness of a young couple registering their marriage at all. The more she thought about it, the more bitter Yun Shusher felt. She lowered her head silently. Chapter 1666. Yun Shusher looked up and tried to smile. "He's the one who's about to enter the marriage grave with me." The woman was speechless. She mumbled, "Why do you make such a happy thing sound so tragic? How can it not be tragic? If she was bullied by him in the future, it would be perfectly justifiable. That man is marrying you. You've made a fortune. Isn't there a saying that marriage is the grave of love? Then do you know what it's called if you're not married?" Yun Shusher asked curiously, "What?" "If you're not married, it's called abandoning your corpse in the wilderness." Yun Shusher was amused by her. "You mean, I have to be grateful?" The woman smiled and was about to say something when her gaze suddenly turned behind him. She looked up slightly in surprise. Yun Shusher felt a chill run down her spine. She turned her head woodenly and saw Muyaja standing behind her. He was sizing her up coldly. "Did you have a good chat?" Muyaja sat down beside her and raised his eyebrows. Yun Shusher couldn't help but shiver. It was all right. She didn't say anything bad about him, did she? Here's the main point. Muyaja stared at her and asked unkindly, "Do you think that marrying me is the same as entering the grave?" Yun Shusher shook her head. The woman reached out her hand to him in a friendly manner and interrupted them. She said happily, "Hello. This handsome guy." Muyaja looked coldly at her outstretched hand. He looked down indifferently and said indifferently, "Do we know each other?" Her enthusiasm was instantly extinguished after being splashed with a bucket of cold water. She retracted her hand resentfully and shrank into her man's arm. She thought to herself, "No wonder the girl doesn't want to marry you. She was so fierce to him. She was being forced to marry him." Perhaps it was because Muyaja was sitting next to her, but Yun Shusher's back was straight and her back was straight. She was like a primary school student who was in class for the first time. She stared straight ahead without moving. Muyaja glanced at her indifferently and inched closer to her ear. His voice was strangely gentle. "Are you very unwilling to marry me, This voice was so gentle that it made one's hair stand on end. Yun Shusher was slightly stunned and her heart trembled. Answer me." Yun Shusher immediately lifted her head and answered matter-of-factly, "I'm willing. Of course I'm willing." "Really?" "Absolutely, from the bottom of my heart." The conversation between the two of them attracted a lot of attention. Everyone looked at them curiously, thinking that this newlywed couple was very interesting. Muyaja narrowed his eyes dangerously and said coldly, "Then don't let me see your face that looks like you're being forced into marriage again." "Face that looks like she's being forced into marriage," Yun Shishir touched the corner of her mouth gloomily. She had to admit that she almost choked to death because of this word. Was her face really that ugly right now? The line moved forward in an orderly manner and it was soon their turn. Before Yun Shishir could react, Mu Yaja grabbed her wrist and practically dragged her all the way to the registration counter. Yun Shishir felt that her head was heavy and her feet were light. She looked at Mu Yaja again and saw that his face was still as calm as water. There was no expression on his face, be it the joy of being newlyweds or the disappointment. Why was he always so calm about everything he did? Chapter 1667. Mu Yaja had put in a lot of effort. Everything was ready and they just needed to take a photo and stamp it. After the photo was taken, the two of them sat at the reception desk. The woman looked up at Yun Shishir and felt a little strange. She wondered if the two of them were willing to get married. However, she didn't want to be a busybody. Just as she was about to hit the stamp, she saw Yun Shishir suddenly jump up like a little puppy. She held the woman's hand that was holding the stamp tightly and shouted, "Wait." After she said that, the staff was shocked by her. They looked up blankly and stared at her blankly. After a while, they asked blankly, "What? What's the matter?" See, it was indeed a forced marriage. Was there a need to be so shocked? Only then did Yun Shishir realize what she had done. Blinking her eyes, she suddenly felt a chill run down her spine and shuddered. She turned around stiffly and saw that a certain man's face was ashen and extremely gloomy. Her roar attracted everyone's attention. They stared curiously at the couple and began to whisper to each other. "It's over, it's all over now." Earlier on, she had grabbed her hands subconsciously. She didn't know why, but when she saw that the stamp was about to hit the stamp, her heart was filled with curses. She didn't know what was wrong with her. She was so agitated that her hands slipped. "What's the matter, female comrade? Why aren't you talking?" Yun Shishir reacted and looked at the man beside her. Suddenly, she asked seriously, "Have you thought it through?" Mu Yaja's expression changed. "Have you thought it through and decided that you want to be with me for the rest of your life?" She probably didn't feel safe. Happiness seemed to have fallen from the sky. She was so worried about her gains and losses that she was trembling with fear and didn't even dare to stretch out her hand to catch it. Mu Yaja frowned. "Are you regretting it? This damned woman." When he proposed to her, she had clearly agreed. Was she regretting it now? Yun Shishir smiled bitterly. "I'm afraid that you'll regret it." She was afraid that she would lose her happiness after having it. She was afraid that if such a day came, she would feel as if it was the end of the world. The staff member was speechless. Her hand that was about to hit the stamp froze in midair. Mu Yaja stared at her face and suddenly smiled deeply. He hugged her shoulders and kissed her passionately on the lips. Their breaths and breaths touched. As he kissed her, he pressed his lips against hers and said word by word, "I've never regretted the things I've done." Yun Shishir's heart trembled. She was so happy that she felt numb. Was this a promise to her in disguise? The staff member was caught off guard and was a little hurt. "So," she asked again, "are you still planning to get married?" "Not." The two of them looked at her and spoke in unison. The staff member was dumbfounded once more. "I'm sorry, sister. I was just afraid that the stamp wouldn't be dark enough." Yun Shishir smiled and pushed the stamp over. She finally had the sweetness of a newlywed. "Dip it in more. Be a glorious witness for us." Did this girl think that she was a revolutionary? Chapter 1668. Yun Shishir was in a good mood. She said casually, "Congratulations to you too." Mu Yaja's expression turned even colder as he glanced at her coldly. This woman was so stupid that she was hopelessly stupid. But he was also hopelessly in love with her. 2 red booklets were placed in her hands. Yun Shishir flipped open the marriage certificate. In the photo, the two of them were wearing white shirts. They were looking at the camera, smiling as they snuggled up to each other. As she looked at it, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. Her mood was as though she was sitting on a hot air balloon, slowly floating into the clouds. She was married. They were married. On the 25th of December 2016, she married herself to him. She was so elated that when she walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, she still felt like she was floating. Look. Yun Shusher was as happy as a child. She showed the marriage certificate to him. We're married. Mu Yaja looked at her dotingly and smiled. I know. Mu Yaja, look, it's our photo. Yun Shusher flipped open the marriage certificate and showed the photo of the two of them. She asked jokingly, don't we look very compatible? Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. Women are really fickle. Yun Shusher's smile faded a little. She didn't understand. Why do you say that? Mu Yaja said, on the way here, you were so unwilling. Now, you're so happy. Yun Shusher retorted, hey, that's not called unwilling. Early in the morning, you suddenly pulled me to the Civil Affairs Bureau without a word of discussion. If it wasn't for the glaring sun outside, I would have thought that I was still dreaming. He pinched her cheeks. His fingertips were so strong that she frowned in pain. Pain? What are you doing? You know pain. Of course. Mu Yaja's smile deepened. So now you believe that this isn't a dream? Yun Shusher smiled and suddenly turned around to face him. She reached out her arms and held his shoulders. He was so tall that when she hugged him tightly, she had to stand on her tiptoes. How nice. Yun Shusher snuggled in his arms and suddenly said something that made him not know whether to laugh or cry. Finally, we're not driving without a license. Mu Yaja, this stupid woman. But no matter how she was, he liked her. After getting into the car, she spread her hands. Give it to me. Mu Yaja stared at her coldly before taking out his wallet and handing over a few bank cards to her. She widened her eyes in shock. What are you doing? Mu Yaja enunciated, I'll hand over my bank card. Yun Shusher, you'll be in charge of the daily expenses. You. Do you have to be so self-conscious? Yun Shusher was shocked by his self-awareness. She only cared about money. Little money grubber. Mu Yaja couldn't help but give her a knock on the head. What else do you want? Yun Shusher rolled her eyes. Of course it's your ID card. So she wasn't asking for his bank cards? Mu Yaja looked at her again, but his gaze was a little strange. Yun Shusher felt that he was looking at her as if he was looking at a pig. Your gaze is very insulting, she reminded him carefully. Mu Yaja ignored her. He opened his wallet and passed his ID card to her. Chapter 1669. She was not reserved at all. She had just registered her marriage, and she was already calling him husband. Mu Yaja was annoyed, but in his heart, he was happy to be called husband. 880214. Is it your birthday? Yes. February 14th. That was Valentine's Day. Who would have thought that her husband was an Aquarius born on Valentine's Day? All right, thank you, my dear husband. Thus, a certain someone shamelessly put the bank card into her wallet. She was calm and collected. Suddenly, she asked suspiciously, are all your belongings here? Sort of. Yun Shusher was displeased. What do you mean sort of? She thought for a moment and narrowed her eyes. Are you secretly hiding money? Mu Yaja was speechless. Yun Shusher said seriously, in the past, the CEO of our company handed his salary card to his wife, but he secretly deposited a card with a lot of money in it. Don't tell me you're hiding money too. Mu Yaja glanced at her coldly and said, honey, you're so cute. How can those men compare to me? When he called her, honey, she instantly blushed. Now, she was still not used to being called that. But she had to get used to it slowly, didn't she? Then, she said in amusement, why can't we compare? Is there a difference? Mu Yaja smiled. Of course there's a difference. Yun Shishir was a little confused. What's the difference? What was the difference? Just this salary card alone was different. Those big bosses, even if they handed over their salary cards to their wives, which one of them did not have other cards in their hands? Some of them, although they were CEOs in name, were hired by the board of directors or with high salaries. Their income could be felt. But it was different for him. He was the owner of Dishing Financial Group. Just the small change in his account was enough for the bank to make a huge profit. The daily interest could reach 8 figures. This was definitely not a bluff. For a huge financial group like Dishing, just the capital chain in their hands was impressive. With such a huge capital chain, the interest in the banks under the Mu Group just kept growing. It was already difficult to calculate. Moreover, with his status, how could it be just an account? The funds in the dozens of accounts under his name were constantly rolling in. What was a salary card? All he knew was that he was paying the salaries of hundreds of thousands of Dishing Financial Group employees. His so-called salary cards were probably just a few of the accounts under his name where he could move his funds. An account was an account, and property was property. His bank account wasn't fixed like those bosses. If he had to describe it, it was like a black hole in the universe. He couldn't see it and couldn't see its bottom. Even he himself didn't know how deep and how big it was. The balance in the card kept accumulating every day. It was probably inexhaustible even if he used it all his life. Therefore, the funds in the account he gave Yun Shishir included about 70% of the movable assets under his name. However, the amount in these accounts could only be said to be a fraction of his personal assets. After all, money would depreciate. After all, in today's inflation, the speed of currency depreciation was not something the bank's interest could keep up with. Chapter 1670. Therefore, most of the assets under his name were invested in real estate and other projects, such as resorts, hotels, shares of listed companies, consortiums, fund pools, private islands, and private land rights. The few digits in his account were just for appetizers. His assets were active, and every day, a few digits would be added to his account. However, even if it was just a fraction to him, to this stupid woman, it might be an astronomical figure. If she went to the bank to withdraw money, the deposit machine wouldn't show the exact amount. She had to be personally received by the VIP service at the counter to withdraw money. Even the bank's lobby manager had to clear the way for her. Therefore, in order to avoid trouble, he specially prepared a small bank card for her. The card had about 8 digits in savings, which could be used for daily expenses and groceries. If Yun Shishir knew that her beloved husband had prepared an 8-digit bank card for her to use to buy groceries, she would be so angry that she would vomit blood. Poor stupid woman. At this moment, she was thinking in her heart. If she tied his bank card to a shopping website, wouldn't she be able to buy without worrying about the account balance being insufficient? If Muyaja knew that she was only capable of this, he would be so angry that he would vomit blood. Perhaps this was the part where the two of them needed to get used to each other the most. Yun Shishir had lived a hard life since she was young. She wished that she could break $1 into $2 to use. Where she could save, she scrimped and saved. She would never be extravagant or wasteful. The biggest temptation of acting was probably the high income. Acting in a show, A-list celebrities could earn hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars per episode. Although it was tough, if they were successful, the glory and benefits that came with it were also very tempting. However, in her eyes, hundreds of thousands was already considered a lot. In Muyaja's eyes, it was beneath contempt. He had lived in such an environment since he was young, so he was almost numb to the concept of money. They were like people from two different worlds. In Yun Shishir's eyes, those few thousands of dollars of wages that were calculative over every ounce were nothing in his eyes. If she knew that he could easily buy an economically developed first-tier city with his ability, how would she feel? If she knew that he could buy 2 countries, would this woman be petrified from shock? She didn't seem to have estimated his net worth at all. She also didn't seem to know what the Mu Group meant. His woman didn't know how terrifying her man was. He was clearly a heavenly dragon, but in her heart, she felt that he was no different from a snake on the ground. This had made him a little depressed. At first, she acted as if she didn't care about him no matter how rich he was. At that time, he thought she was an idiot. Slowly, he began to suspect that this woman was pretending to be a pig to eat the tiger. She was very scheming and shrewd. It was not until later that he realized that she was an idiot. She was different from those women who were good at scheming. She might be a little stupid, but he liked her pure and unadulterated personality even more. Yun Shishir didn't know what he was thinking. Suddenly, she nudged him with her elbow. You didn't regret handing over your bank card? Mu Yaja smiled but didn't say anything. She threatened, don't blame me when I squander all your money. Chapter 1671. It just so happens that I lack a woman who can squander my family fortune for me. Mu Yaja's lips curled up. His eyes were conceited and domineering, with a hint of domineering indulgence. Man! He had built this Mu empire just so that one day, his woman and child could live a happy and prosperous life. Other than that, even if he had shocking power, it was meaningless. Yun Shishir was a little overwhelmed by his domineering words. She had only heard men say this before, I lack a woman who can run the house diligently for me. But she had never heard a man say this in such a bold manner, I lack a woman who can squander my family fortune for me. He said this naturally because he had the confidence to do so. Yun Shishir could not help but want to pour cold water on him. She giggled and said jokingly, I don't believe you when you say this now. He was puzzled. Why? Yun Shishir said seriously, if you dare to say this before Singles Day, then you are a real man. Mu Yaja was speechless. This stupid woman. Mu Yaja stared at her face with a deep gaze. Yun Shishir saw his gaze and raised her eyebrows as if she was provoking him. Why? Am I right? No matter when, I dare to say such words. Mu Yaja liked how she acted like a clown. He could not help but pinch her cheeks and smile. If you have the ability, squander my money. He did not believe that she would lose more than he earned. Yun Shishir smiled and pretended to be a clown as she leaned closer to him. She held his arm and giggled. Tycoon, if you are so rich, do you lack pendants on your legs? Nope. Yun Shishir's smile disappeared and she pretended to be wronged as she stared at him. Unexpectedly, he leaned closer to her and stared into her eyes. He said teasingly, I lack a place in my heart. Do you want it? His voice was so charming and his breath was like orchids. His warm breath brushed against her cheeks. His ambiguous words of love made her blush and her heart beat faster. However, he rarely said sweet nothings. Occasionally, he would say a sentence, but it was impossible to resist. Yun Shishir's face instantly turned as red as blood. It was unbelievably hot. She seemed to be shy so easily. Even if she didn't express it, the blush on her face betrayed her. Her skin was extremely fair. Thus, at this moment, the flush on her face was simply unable to conceal her helplessness and shyness. Yun Shishir suddenly thought of something. She looked up and asked curiously, Hey, I want to ask you, why did you suddenly drag me to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get our marriage certificate? Hello? Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows slightly. Clearly, he was dissatisfied with the way she addressed him. Honey, pay attention to your words. What should you call me? Yun Shishir blushed again, she didn't seem to be able to adapt so quickly. She knitted her brows. Under his deep gaze, she said shyly, Han. Hubby. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows in relief. Clearly, this form of address was even more pleasing to the ear. Call me that again. Yun Shishir was like a child who was learning how to speak. She lowered her head slightly and consolidated her revision under his guidance. Hubby, you're too soft. Hubby. Be gentler. Yun Shishir cleared her throat and said softly, Hubby.